What's up, David?
Oh man, I like that music you got going on.
Oh, just some of that free stuff. So let's get the welcome back to the off. Wow, let's start this one again. Welcome back to Off the Dot, guys. I'm your host, JC Dropshot. If you're new here, be sure to give us a like, follow, and leave a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher Radio, or anything else that you might be listening to this to on, because, well, the internet overlords require that so we get found. So without further ado, David, what's up, man?
Howdy. Listen, I got invited to this show, right?
Yeah.
Truly invited. So I brought a bowl of popcorn, and so I'm just gonna sit here now, eat my popcorn, and watch you roll. Is that?
Uh-oh. I'm not sure how this works.
Oh, wait a minute.
I think you have to participate in this tonight.
Well, I feel sorry for your fans, but I'll do the best I can.
So, for those here that do not know who you are, because obviously I know who you are, give everybody a quick little 5-cent tour bio.
Yeah. So those who don't know me, don't know who I am, you're very, very lucky. You'll live long, healthy lives, and your opinions will stay retained, wrapped in that gray matter of yours. If you do know me, I feel sorry for you because we will probably talk hours on end about lures, lure action, and fish behavior. My name is David Swendseid. I am an R&D specialist manager for Duo International, the Realis side. Realis is the kind of the bass brand side of Duo International, who makes a number of lures, in definitely different multi-species lures, saltwater lures, exotic lures, but they have a line called Realis, which is their bass line primarily. And so I'm a bridge to that, and have been working with them for a number of years. I help them develop products as well as sustain products, as well as release products. I've been in the fishing industry in some capacity, probably almost 30 years, if not 30 years at this point in time. I've been in the Japanese side of things since the mid-90s, believe it or not, from reels, rods to lures. I've worked and helped companies out in different capacities, private contracts, as well as promotional. So some of you know I've helped a number of companies out, but I was familiar with Lucky Craft in the early days and helped them out quite a bit, especially in ad exec kind of accounts, and some fishing development stuff. I also helped lead some of the way for Jackal Lures, which is now a pretty popular lure up in Canada, for example, a company in Canada. Prior to Shimano's acquisition, as far as their distribution goes, I was the product specialist manager there, and introduced a technique and named a technique called flick shaking, which many of you tournament anglers actually utilize in some capacity. Wacky jig head fishing, Ichi wacky jig head fishing. So Jackal kind of captured that technique, and we went from there, refined it. I named it. It's not actually a Japanese technique. It was developed by a Korean tournament angler, believe it or not. And I forget his name off the top of my head now, but a couple of the pro staffers with Jackal and anglers with Jackal also borrowed that technique and branded it under their namesake. And then from there, I renamed it and then articulated it as best I could for what I was considering the tournament side of things. So worked out with them quite a bit, helped a couple of Japanese line companies, some big bait companies as well, helped a couple of big bait companies get going, and found home to be Duo International, the company that I'm with now. And hopefully my goal is to make Duo one of the top brands, JDM brands in the US. And that's a big, big task on my part. And I've got a lot of sleepless nights ahead of me. But On
I
a
think
base
you're doing a good job. You're doing a good job there. It's at the top of the list for me,
well,
and for many of us on St. Clair. So,
and I want to give a shout out to Mr. Adachi. He's not as probably outspoken as I am, but he came out of the bass fishing industry earlier days. He was developing lures and doing that kind of stuff, and then kind of went, I don't want to say underground, but kind of disappeared a little bit and started in on OEMing stuff and saltwater, and was really successful. Where he shines is that he has this immense amount of talent in developing lure. Just the development, there's so many things to it than just a basic CAD design, and so he has that stuff down. His aids as well.
Is that the gentleman that we see carving on those copper originals and that spy baiting video? Okay,
correct. Yeah.
That is some artwork right there. I would love to get one of those copper blanks just for the mantle. That'd be sweet.
He is he's a great guy. He really is. I consider him a friend. He's a great guy. He tolerates my humor, which is probably a good thing. I'm quite a jokester when I go to Japan, so he definitely tolerates my humor there. He'll say things like "ha ha ha," American joke. So that means he heard me. He's done with me. So, but again, a great company that I'm working with. One of my goals and aspirations when I joined Duo was for them to strongly consider what we call a true R&D department. And to be honest with you, that's a very, very hard thing to do. It's extremely hard. It's very expensive.
It's very rare nowadays.
Yes, very rare. There's guys at companies that will get on the computer and stretch a CAD design and throw a couple curves in it and beat a patent or something like that. But it's really, my hat goes off to true lure designers that are still out here doing this, because a lot of companies are bottom line companies. And so there just really isn't a great interest in that. And it was, I think, in some degree, it was hard for Duo as well, except that the chief then was CEO, Mr. Adachi, was a lure designer. So that played into it. But they really did take heed to this dream that I had about trying to carve out a little space among Duo that would allow us to create and recreate and improve and do those kind of things. And obviously, some of you guys know, we signed Aaron Martens, and we're his title sponsor. Aaron and I probably go back, I don't know, 25 years or so. We've known each other. We used to fish the same lake as kids, Lake Acetas and Castaic as kids. His mom would drop him off. I think I would ride my bike. But as we got older, we ran into each other a few times and would joke and have some good times. And then I fished a few tournaments and bumped into him there. And long story short, we just hit it off. He's a tinker and thinker, and so am I. So we love to just sit there and draw out in our minds things to make things work or get better. And so that's one reason he's with us. The lure development side of Duo. He has a passion in lure development. And
how is he doing, by the way? Because many of us are aware of he had a medical situation out fishing.
Yes. So not too long ago, he got disoriented and was rushed to the hospital. There he was diagnosed to have two growths inside his head, and they were later found out to be tumors. They quickly removed those tumors in about a 2-week period of time. Got them out, got a lot of that mass out. He will require further treatment that includes chemo. And so it was heart-wrenching for me to hear that diagnosis. But once I heard that he was committed to fighting this, I'm elated. And along with, I'm good friends with his wife, Leslie, who I adore. I love that family, by the way. But it's great to see this family really, really put themselves together. On top of that, I'm working with a couple different companies, and we're just talking about, just what's best for this family. And I'll probably maybe be able to sneak some information out to you at a later time of just some thoughts and stuff that I have and that other people have about just wrapping our support around this this family. You know, this is a serious diagnosis. There have been people that have done very well and survived. So that is there in the record books. Aaron is committed to doing this, and with tremendous amount of courage and actually future-oriented thinking. So I'm elated about that, and I don't see any other way but to go forward and to support him in that process.
It's good to hear that he's doing well. I know he did was an Instagram update not too long ago.
Yeah, probably.
When he was actually out walking around, and that you could tell it's definitely taking his toll on him physically and mentally, emotionally. I mean, that's a scary situation, man. It really is.
It's been a year for me. I had another friend that just passed away as well. He got pancreatic cancer. These guys both I care about them both, Aaron and this other gentleman that I have, and it's just these diseases are so pervasive, and there's some of them are so aggressive, and so you really start thinking about this thing on a different scale. My good friend just passed away not too long ago. We weren't able to do his funeral, which was just supposed to be a few days ago because of the COVID situation.
Yeah.
So it compounds things. So I say that heartfelt to any family members, to any friends who are out there that are dealing with some of this stuff, COVID or cancer or illness of any sort. My heart goes out to you. I know that we in the industry don't think about this. One of my friends, Shaw Gripsey Jr., who is a phenomenal angler, as you know, and a historic legend angler, he had cancer. They found it looks like they eradicated it successfully, which I'm grateful for as well. But yeah, this stuff it's real. It's part of life, unfortunately, for sure.
Well, talking about another Grisby with that same last name, but not related, smoked some fish on Lake St. Clair on a spybait, and I remember that event very vividly. I'm sure you do as well. You are the reason why I got into spybaiting. I think I got one of the very first ones in a random manila envelope sent to me in the office with no explanation other than a one Japanese language video with no closed caption going, "What is this weird topwater bait?"
Yeah, exactly.
How is this? This is way too heavy. This doesn't have enough buoyancy to float. What the heck is this thing?
Just do it.
But after what was it, a couple hour phone call, and went out and started smashing fish, and I was like, "This is gonna change Lake St. Clair."
Well, Justin, you should pat yourself on the back. I talk about this a lot. Spy baiting is probably the easiest, most difficult finesse technique to learn. And I mean that because I've had bona fide pros who have won a lot of money, have a big career, and they just scratch their head and struggle with this presentation. But as they get around the curve, what I'm going to call the learning curve, you can see the lights go on, and you can see how they start to applicate and things start to come around. And Chad he's just a cool cat anyways. He's a good fisherman. People may know him of this spy baiting victory, but he's had other victories, and he's had other big title win. And he just became a really, really good student of this presentation, and that I think shined. I think he set like 4 all-time records in that tour event.
I think he lost 1 or 2 fish that would have put him in the Century Club on smallmouth, which I think only has happened 1 other time, if at all.
Well, it hasn't happened in the tour events.
Yeah, it was a non-tour event that did that.
But right. He probably has the biggest sack of smallmouth ever caught in a professional tour event. I think he was 97.8 pounds, if I'm not mistaken.
It was a lot.
But if you can imagine,
impressive.
You are 1 fish basically away from 100 pounds of smallmouth.
Yep.
I can remember back in the day. Now I know St. Clair's been a little bit spoiled with the goby situation, and so they get a little bit more protein than they used to. But I can remember when we would talk about a 4-pound smallmouth being really in that trophy category.
Yeah, that 8 or 10 pound largemouth. for a lot of people.
Yeah. And so you caught a 4-pound smallmouth, and that was a stout fish. And even out west where I live, 5-pound smallmouth, it can be somewhere between 12 and 15 years old. That fish has it takes a long time for, and out in Oregon in the Columbia River, I fish about almost 400 miles of the Columbia River. But
are you allowed to fish the Columbia again?
Say again?
Are you allowed to get the boat out and go fish again, or they still closed it up?
As long as this doesn't broadcast out there in Oregon and Washington too, yes, I sneak out there.
Gotcha.
I sneak out there. I'm going to try to sneak out there, even if I have to roll my bass boat down a mountain, shoot it across a railroad track and into the pond. No ramp. I'm going to try to fish.
So you're saying the Allison is an all-terrain boat now, not just a watercraft?
I sure hope I don't have to demonstrate that. Yeah.
So explain everybody, kind of the history of spy baiting, where it came from, the whole original concept on the Japanese side.
Yeah. People don't realize this, and I think I have a couple up here, but I'll just showcase my my earliest spy baits. And if I can find our little camera, but here is a spy bait. People probably have never seen this one before.
And that is not a floating lure, correct?
That is not. It's a sinking prop bait, hence spy bait.
I know back in the 40s and 50s here in the States, there was baits that looked similar to that, but they were made to float.
Yes. So so what you're seeing right now is you're seeing sinking prop baits. And actually, when you look at these in close up, they're pretty advanced baits. I mean, they've got a thrush washer on the front of them, on the back of them. They've got bent props on them. Let me bring that puppy up there so you can see. Yep. This one in particular has fins. And these are dated around 1930s through the 1950s for the most part, I think, if I remember correctly. But those are what I would call ancient spy baits. So spy baiting, sinking prop bait concept was well in the U.S. a long time ago. The issue was this puppy just didn't whack the fish crazy like. And and if you can tell, it's a bit of a departure from what we call a spy bait today, right? Oh, yeah. So, but that's where the concept originated from, as far as I can recall. Now, maybe in Europe they also had sinking prop baits. I don't have any record of that. But in the U.S., at least, we do have a phase where they kind of got into it. Then you go to Japan, and the Japanese were taking props and putting them on everything, including jerk baits, filing down jerk bait bills, not putting jerk bait bills in the bodies, and then attaching props. They were doing all sorts of things. And so there was multiple versions of prop baits. Out came a phase of sinking prop baits, swisher baits, micro-pulsing baits with some of the names. And so, it was an inlay of multiple different ones. Where spy baiting kind of took off is we took that idea and we kept refining it because there was some sinking prop baits that today I could hand them to you, and sure, you may catch a couple fish, but you're not going to win a tournament on them. Some of them you cast 3 times and they would literally fall apart. And so it was just an assortment out there. Where I think we as Duo we took that process seriously, and we just refined that process more and more and more. We had a guide, I call him Nishizumi-san, but he also loved the sinking prop bait concept. He fished it quite a bit for big largemouth, so he was getting some fish on it. But we, as a group, R&D group, just continued to refine that process, and we regurgitated up this concept called spy baiting. My goal was to catch the most difficult fish we know of, and try to do that on a regular, consistent route. And that's hard to do. But as you could see, the guys that really got the concept, the first place I introduced spy baiting was in Texas. Now, people don't know that. They're kind of like, no way. I heard that, it's a hot deal up in Mille Lacs, or it's a hot deal up in Canada on Simcoe, or it's a hot deal up in, in St. Clair or Green Bay. But it was actually in Texas, and a handful of anglers there, I won't mention any names, kept me sworn secrecy. Took the bait and fished tournaments with it. What is interesting is that's not their way of fishing. You know, they really are big bait. I don't want to call it Bubba fishing, but they are big bait kind of thinkers, presenters. They're trying to get the
better fish over the head with the lure versus
and really good crankbait artists. A lot of those Texans are really, really good with a crankbait. They truly are. Whether it's a square bill, Mark Pack, who's on my pro staff, is a phenomenal angler and has years of experience as a guide and a tournament angler. But he's another example. He knows exactly what a square bill is utilized for. He's a legend out in Texas. But what I'm getting at is the Texans had the spy bait before everyone else. I mean, as far as a state. And they didn't talk about it until 3 years ago, 2.5 years ago, which is hilarious because I introduced it to them 2012. Okay, so if you think about it, so if you want, what I'm getting at, folks, is if you want to keep a secret, tell a Texan. That's what I'm trying to say.
There you go.
Okay, but most recently, some great Dave Mansue, a phenomenal angler. He's fished FLW and a number of different things. Scott Martin was in Texas. You know, he was caught spy baiting. I mean, there's just been a handful of Texans that do it. Some guides now do it. From there, it was going south, kind of Alabama-ish, and then Georgia. So you're talking about Lake Lanier. It moved into there. And the funny thing is that Lanier, you know, that's a spotted bass fishery. So that was my second goal.
It should do well on a spotted bass.
Well, and you would think so, but I don't want to say I got a lot of hate mail, but I got some resistance. Some of the Georgian boys were like, hey, listen, throwing 6-pound test above the trees, those spotted bass are going to come in, grab that bait if you're lucky, and then they're going to head to those trees and they're going to break it off. And there is truth to that. There is truth to that. So I'm not dismounting in that. But to me, I was thinking, don't you want to at least find out, get bit? I mean, so I'm a desperate fisherman. But later on, the Georgians took that bait, and they are still winning tournaments, spy baiting on like Lanier, those kind of places. And then you move into Alabama. I have some good pro staffers out there and guides. Chris Jackson, who's a good long-term friend of mine. He came from my Jackal days as well. But Chris does an array of stuff, but he guides out there, and he took spy baiting onto another plateau out there, catching all sorts of species of fish. And so the South took it, but it was kind of funny. The tournament anglers wouldn't talk about it at all. I mean, they just wouldn't talk about it. I'm talking, I can name 50 professional anglers right now that spy bait in the South that will not talk about it. So it is effective. And then obviously that grassroots movement kind of started up into the Great Lakes area, really kind of bypassing some states, mid-states, and going up into there. And then you saw I'm going to say the Michigan guys. I probably forced them to talk a little bit more than the rest of the guys. I feel I'm going to apologize ahead of time.
Well, I tell you what, I had a shameless reason to talk because I was working in a tackle store and I wanted to sell a lure that no other shop on the lake could get, and I wanted to promote it. So I had a shameless reason to promote it, so I didn't care. You know, I had all those guys coming to my store clearing pegs, thinking that I couldn't get stuff back the next week, and I'm like, hey, David, I need more. Or Martin, send me another order, buddy.
Right. It was really a cool thing to see up there too. And obviously I want to give you a lot of credit in that as well. You were one of those students that didn't hold back, just was like, hey, I'm going to learn this thing from tip to tail. And I think that really helped your clientele because you were able to pull that technique apart, not only find out the basis of why it's working, how it's working, but, you know, adapt to it. You can take the bait itself, throw it up in the sky, and a seagull's going to eat it. That's how effective it is, right? So, So as you become a real versatile angler, you're going to have more and more opportunities. Now I have some friends in the industry that are sponsored by other companies, so I won't mention their names, but I turned them on to spy baiting, and they won a lot of money. They may have not won a tournament on it, but they won a lot of money on it. Later on, maybe some other companies knocked on their doors and said, you need now to make one for us. But but what I'm getting at is it's been really a joy, honestly, to watch it take hold, take traction. I still, to this day, if I'm available and have the time, I'm not afraid to sit down and try to help a guy through it. I did make a portal for guys. It's not an advertisement portal. It is a portal that says, hey, this is what line, rod, reel you can use. This is how to kind of consider your first few days of spy baiting. And it's really helped to help get a guy started. So if guys go to just spybaiting.com or www.spybaiting.com, they'll get it. Really, it's guys, it's not there for sales. I'm going to sell spy baits. I'm not there trying to do anything. This is really to help you guys out, honestly. So spybaiting.com, get out there and look at it. You can peruse through the information. I wrote it almost like a book form. I gave quite a bit of information on fish positioning, behavior, presentation, just to get guys going. I hear some new sponsored individuals with different companies now that are carrying the spy bait. They'll say, well, you don't hear many people talk about this, but I spy bait on flats. And I'm like, we were spy baiting on flats 1,000 years ago. So spybaiting.com will help you guys get just the basics of spy baiting down, and then you can move that direction that you need to. Aaron Martens in 2015 or 14, I'm going to say, he cracked like $30,000, $40,000 spy baiting on a flat before any pro was doing it. And he made a lot of money in one tournament spy baiting, catching some really big fish. And if I remember correctly, that was up in there in the Michigan region. So it talks about it. It gives you some pointers. It tells what gear to use. And again, these are just starting points. When I talk to guys individually, I get asked the question, if you had one spy bait only, what one would you use?
ADG fix, sorry.
Right.
Chartreuse gill, give me it.
The ADG fix is by far, I had quite a bit in input in the ADG fix, but the ADG fix is designed for tournament fishing. Some guys will say, well, I heard it's heavier. The weight difference in the 80 and the ADG fix is literally only 1 gram, but you can get about 30 more feet in distance in casting that lure, which obviously increases your accuracy as well as your distance casting. The 80 and the ADG fix behave slightly different. If you pull the slack out of your line, the ADG fix will start to dive head down. If you pull the slack on the original one, it'll still fall kind of flat and tail first. So they'll fall differently because of their fall position or posture. They can get to deeper depths at a different rate. But you can control that with your rod tip and line incorporation. So I should probably go into what spy baits we have, I imagine.
Because it's expanded since the 80 ADG fix and 90, which was the original 3.
Right.
And I remember.
Right.
Come to the States.
Right, exactly. And here's what I'm going to get at. It's not only, it's a research project for us that we keep releasing data on, which allows our anglers or the guys that are supporting us to stay ahead of the pack. I mean, there are other companies creating lures of similarity in this process, but the data that we have is really extensive. We're talking hundreds and hundreds of hours of real valuable information. And so that gets imparted into the lure at different frequencies. So most recently, we came out with what we call the all-new I-class. And I don't know if you can see, it's that yellow tag there to say all new, and then on there it says I-class. But that gives you an example of what it looks like. It's in the new packaging. It's kind of red packaging.
I love the new packaging, actually. It's It's really sweet. I like it. Stands out good in the peg.
Oh, good. I like that too, I guess.
If they can't see it, they can't buy it.
Yeah, exactly. The I-Class is a new series, and the new series came about because I wanted to make the spin bait more durable, and hopefully some of the other natural consequences in doing that would be we'd get more performance out of the lure. So it's actually cast further. It's actually a more accurate lure. It's extremely more reliable, more durable lure by far. Basically fail safe. We have new additions of colors. We have a coloring or colorway process called chroma fusion. And that comes from one of our chroma fusion patterns is BKIU. Justin, you're probably familiar with BKIU.
Oh yeah.
And so BKIU is an example, but you'll roll that bait through the water, and as it lists or rocks back and forth, it will change color, purple to green. So we have the chroma infusion process involved. We have a new hook, obviously, in our baits that is gray in color, but is pretty much a nano-coated hook, which is like your mother's Teflon on a pan, the cooking Teflon. It's very similar to that, but probably more micronized is the best way to explain it. But this very, very slick hook that has great penetrability, especially for a light wired hook. So that's incorporated in the all new I-Class. But the goal was to make a better spin bait than what is out there that we already have. I strongly believe that what we have is superior to what's out there. I've tested the other lures. And my goal is to keep us out in front as best as possible. So that's that. So we'll be releasing baits and series in order to do that. And that's really to help the angler benefit. You're not really seeing like these huge margins of profit because of what we're doing, but we really, really believe in the technique. It's like if you really made the learning curve on drop shotting, now you have multiple different worms to drop shot with, for example. You drop shot different links maybe on your line, and so you've really elaborated. Well, we're just giving the angler those opportunities. We had what you have up there right now, the Great Lakes series, for example.
Big fan of the Emerald Shiner one. The very first day I had that in the water. In fact, that whole week I smashed 4-pound and up smallmouth. I did catch a lot of sheephead on it. It's the only color I've caught a pile of sheephead on. So figure that one out. I don't know why that is. And it wasn't near the bottom, so sheephead are not bottom oriented, but they were fun. I did a quick little video of that happen. The very first one. That was a little bit of a shock.
Well, I've heard of sheephead. I've never caught them before. I've heard
freshwater drum. It's like a redfish, but with super high back on it.
Yeah. And so you guys used to talk about that. I mean, up to a few years ago, you'd say, "Oh yeah, David, I got an 18-pound sheep," and I'm like, "What the heck? What is that?" Well, I had fished a FLW Costa Championship, and it was down on Gunnersville, and I finally caught one of those things.
They got some big ones in Gunner.
Holy smoke! Actually, it was a beautiful fish. It had multiple colors in it. When the light hit it,
had that gold back going probably.
Yeah, I was like, I can't turn this fish. It didn't feel like a carp. It didn't feel like a big old channel cat. Like, what the heck is it? I was convinced I had the biggest smallmouth in Gunnersville for sure. And finally, this thing bubbled up, and I was like, what the heck did I just catch? So I had one limited experience with those fish.
As much as everybody wants to hate on them up here, if you're having a fun fishing day, you just enjoy the tug for them because they just freaking pull hard.
Oh,
There's been days growing up, I would go out in Breast Bay on Lake Erie and go drag tubes in 8 foot of water and just pound sheephead. And everybody's out walleye fishing. I used to be in a 16-foot canoe, 3.5 horse Nissan, little 2-stroke on the back of it, out there on this old, like, rumored to be a Spanish galleon wood shipwreck, but it's not. No way it can be a Spanish galleon. But it was a wooden boat that was sunken in Breast Bay. Sure. And I lost so many tubes on that trying to pull those sheephead off that timber. But it was a ball because when those things they hit it hard and just took off. And these things were like 2 to 5 pounders, and occasionally you get that big 8, 10, 12, and you just can't turn them on that light tackle. It was a ball.
Yeah.
I love doing it.
I think mine was maybe 4 pounds, but I'll tell you what, it left me crazed. I could not turn that fish, and yeah, you're absolutely right there.
Well, David Fish has an interesting question. Why is it called spy baiting?
Spy baiting. So the reason we call it spy baiting is the technique is called spy baiting, the technique of silent capture. The idea is that the bait actually has an extremely soft, unpronounced, blunted signature. That means the action of it is very, very unintrusive, I may say. And when it comes into the area, it has multiple actions that that we found out through research that triggered the fish. It wasn't that the fish just kind of saw it and ate it. It actually moved those fish in a number of ways, but it triggered them to bite. And sometimes, if their strike windows were really, really tight, you wouldn't see that behavior until the bait really snuck in close to them. Now, sometimes their windows were 20 feet, and so they could see that spy bait out there. They would see the spin bait 80 out there on its own, and they'd go up and get it and say, easy snack, and eat it. But a lot of times their windows were very, very tight, especially when they suspend off the bottom. So if you get a largemouth, for example, that suspends 8 feet off of 12 or 8 feet off of 15, their viewing window is huge. Usually, they're not usually butt up in a cave doing that. They're out in the open off of a tree or off of a bluff end, and they can kind of have this almost 360 view of what's going on. So their windows are quite big to see things. So throwing a jerk bait, they'll see the boisterous action of the jerk bait out there and not be interested. When you throw the spin bait, if you came into that zone of where they're at, they wouldn't really detect anything except seeing this kind of non-eventful minnow kind of coming in. And as it got closer, then some other behaviors took place. And so that's how we came up with that name, spy bait or spy baiting, the technique of silent capture.
Should have trademarked it.
Well, we can talk about that as well.
Especially the spin bait should have been trademarked.
The neat thing about this technique, honestly, is that you can move outside of the suspended fish. Like, I'm teaching guys now to fish very deep with the spin bait and actually fish in 25 foot of water. And guys will say, 25 foot of water? Are you kidding me? That's way too deep, man.
I mean, on St. Clair, we're fishing 16 to 20, in the summertime out on that center area right now, and it's works for us.
Yeah.
Those deep cabbage beds.
Yeah, and so guys kind of get into that takes way too long, but I tell them, I want you to do me a favor, especially if they're fishing with me. And I have guys from all over the world that come to fish from South Africa, from Japan. I've had guides from Japan that have flown out to fish with me to learn spy baiting, believe it or not. And so, or at least refine it more. The cool thing is, if you're sitting on the front of your deck on a 21-foot bass boat and you turn around and you look at your engine, you're looking at 20 feet or more. That's it. And you can throw a tissue basically that far and hit that engine almost. So 20 feet is not as bad as guys think it is. It's just the back of your engine that's attached to your boat and the jack plate. So when you start conceptualizing it that way, you realize that you really don't have that far to go. The other thing about spy baiting that becomes a challenge is guys say is it takes too long. I'm sitting here reeling slowly to make something happen. What I can tell you is I've done this before. Had a guy throw out a jerk bait, increase the cadence, and then turn around and throw a spin bait, and he found out that there was very little difference in line incorporation and the time that those two lures came in. So you're gonna have a little bit of adjustment in fishing that technique, but it's not that dramatic once you kind of settle in. It is. The other thing I tell people is it's really not a confidence technique. What I'm getting at is, don't go into this technique trying to say, well, all I got to do is build confidence, because you can get rewarded on this technique instantly. Justin knows this. Instantly, you can get rewarded. End up whacking 30 fish and getting 15 pounds or 20 pounds of bass and saying what a wonderful day, and then the next day not catch them. So instant reward is very possible with this technique, or you catch schooling fish doing this thing too. So the idea behind spy baiting is to develop a discipline, I say, versus a confidence measure. I always use this analogy. You know, if you guys know what a Golden Gloves boxer is. Well, Golden Gloves boxer, he didn't get his Golden Gloves from hanging out. He got his Golden Gloves from working his tail off in order to get that recognition. And you take that young boxer and you take him down to the end of the street corner in that really seedy, bearded, hairy, greasy man bar down there, and all of us may be terrified walking in there, but if the poop hit the fan, his fighting skills would probably prevail. I'm not saying for sure, but I'm saying once he defaulted to that, it would be his discipline, his training, those type of things that would actually make him a contender there. It's the same thing in spy baiting. If you practice the technique and get the discipline, then you can apply that all over. And like I said, this catches all species of bass. It's not just smallmouth.
There's one tip I can give everybody on just getting the discipline part of it that's helped a lot of my customers, and that is get a slower gear ratio, especially if you're used to fishing fast, because that cadence is so important to get that discipline to control it and hold it, at that nice sweet spot speed. And for me, it's helped by getting a slow reel, a 5 or even a 4.8 if you can find one of those old ones in good shape still. And it's helped me a lot. It's helped a lot of my customers. But there's other guys that can control that 6-2, high-speed spinning reel that's out there that most people are getting now.
Yeah, and for the guys that like, hey, listen, I just want to go fish. And, I tell them to throw the bait over the side of the boat, let it sink down a foot, and start retrieving it and watching. And the speed in which you get the props engaged is a good resting point. That's a good place to master the speed of the retrieve. So as you're pulling the bait along and the blades start to rotate, that's the speed you want to capture. That's going to keep you in a safe zone. Really, there isn't any necessary reason, logic to manipulate this lure in any way or fashion. Now, I've done this. I have hundreds and hundreds, maybe thousands of hours now into spy baiting. So I've pulled the bait real quickly. I've burned the bait. I've done all these other things on populations of fish that are what I call a control set. I know that what these fish are going to do every single year at the same seasonal time frames under the conditions they're given. So they're very predictable. And in testing those fish, and these are hundreds of fish, not just 10, but in testing against those fish, the speed of retrieve really was important to execute that constant or the consistency versus anything else. And again, I can burn the bait on the surface and get one to blow up on it, maybe, or do that kind of stuff. But I would catch fish that were suspended more times than not by allocating the time in getting the retrieve down. After you get the retrieve down and you feel comfortable with that, like you can do it with your eyes closed, then you can do some other things and get tricksy with it. But this is one lure, honestly, that you can. I joke about this, but I am serious, that you can fish right out of the box. You don't have to go and change things out of it. You don't have to change the hooks. You don't have to drill into it. You don't have to do anything to this lure. This lure has won literally over $1 million in tournament fishing. And I know this per confidence of tournament anglers.
So my wife wants to know what your favorite color in a spy bait is. Your personal favorite color. Now, keep in mind, don't just choose the one that's got the most stock in Japan right now.
Good point. My favorite color is whatever color Christine thinks is her favorite.
I don't think I've ever put a spy bait in her hand yet and let her fish.
Listen,
I've given her drop shots, I've given her Ned rigs, and just sit down and hold the rod and let's see what happens. Because I need someone in the boat doing nothing to see if something works.
Well, no, it's a good question. It really is a good question. I have several favorites. I kind of break them up like this. I have reflective patterns, and then I have what I call very natural patterns. And then I have what I call illumination patterns, or patterns that kind of glow or get opaque, or that type of colorway. And so for me, I break it down into those things. So my favorite reflective patterns would be like the new river bait. I really like that because that actually emulates smelt, especially out by us, and also out in the northeastern region as well. So
we have them here on the Great Lakes. We actually are getting a decent amount of comeback on them in the St. Clair River, Lake St. Clair, in the lower Huron, which a lot of guys are starting to explore that deep, big water. Those fish, there's few and far between. There's not a ton of fish, but they're all mega smallmouth when you find them.
Yeah, so the reflective pattern, that pattern, and there's another pattern called Wagasaki, which is another reflective pattern. That one, those two reflective patterns are probably my favorite, I would say. I use others. I use all the colors, by the way, and I do test them extensively so that I have some level of information I can give pro anglers and whatnot. But those would be the two on the reflective side. Then I get into the natural patterns. And my personal natural pattern favorites would be like Ghost Minnow, for sure. Would be a natural pattern. That would be one of my favorites.
One of my top three.
Green Smelt is a favorite of mine. I design green smelt as well, but it's another favorite of mine. The Great Lakes, I like that one. That's green smelt right there. The Great Lakes one as well. And then, the smelt as well in the Great Lakes pattern. That one, yes. So that too is my favorite. But then probably we move a little bit outside the natural, but it's still in that, would be the BKIU. So BKIU doesn't look like any particular fish, but it's very natural. Against the bottom. It's an extremely natural pattern against the bottom.
Well, I'm finding that baits that have that color changing black, green back, or even a side on it, particularly on St. Clair, there's times that shade of paint for some reason can really trigger fish. I know you guys use it. Rapala uses it on some of their newer stuff, the Shadow Wraps. It's a really cool paint. I know nothing about it other than it looks cool. But that I think is a sleeper for guys on St. Clair.
Yeah,
they definitely should be picking up more often.
Yeah, and the BKIU is a development color. One of the things that Duo has been so gracious with me on, at least at this time in my life, they allowed me to come up with this color, and this color is actually a graduation of colors. And what I did is took a base color. I don't know if you remember Purple Rain. Remember that color?
The best walleye catching spin bait ever made by Duo. I caught so many walleye in that color, and I think I got like 4 or 5 of them left. Well, a lot of walleye in that color.
Purple Rain did amazingly well on Erie, for example, and it also did amazingly well in Georgia and on Smith Lake as well. But from that color and from a couple other colors emerged BKIU, believe it or not. And what I was doing was I was looking at percentages of catches, using this at a certain time, at a certain depth, with a certain amount of light penetration, and we just kept tweaking it. And so BKIU is kind of the perfection side of that. It is so deadly. That color is so deadly. I can tell a guy he could probably go out in 3/4 of his presentation and just fish that color and do well. It's that effective. When it gets into the upper column, it literally changes colors as it lists. Yeah. So it has this super natural presentation. It just kind of camouflages itself really well. But super cool color. It took a lot of time, a lot of work, but it's well worth it for sure. And then on the lighter side of things, the chartreuse shad, the ghost pearl. I use the ghost pearl probably more, but I'd carry one of those two patterns, and American shad too would work in that category. That would also work in that category, but it's kind of that lighter what's the other one? It's the Smoky Bone. I don't know if we still have that in play, but
I
that
think that's only in the 80s and the 90s now.
yeah. So that one too would have come into that kind of opaque white, and you can use that in cloud cover as well. You know, those type of situations. So those would be examples, but you know, we have some really, really cool colors, like a color that I'm real partial to that I don't get a fish a lot. I just don't have a lot of them. Is I think you bypass it. It's up above. You go to the middle there, one over in the middle, and then go up. No, stay in the middle lane. Yeah, there we go. Stay there, right where you're at. That's it. No, over one more, where you were before, to the left. Yeah, there you go. That color right there is super effective, and I have them because I know they're effective. I didn't get as much R&D time with them, but I caught a lot of fish with them, and so it's always been in my back burner as well. But that color is absolutely deadly.
It's like a super translucent, like that chartreuse powder blue that a lot of the crankbaits have here in the States.
Yes,
It's a
it
translucent version of it.
it actually has. If I don't know if you can get a blow up of that, but it has quite a bit of transparency in it, and it's designed to carry light through that body a little bit more. So in the water, it looks different. There you go. It looks different than what it does there against that white background, if I may. Once you get it in the water, it actually looks really good. But that's called Komochi shad. Yeah, there you go. You got it. Okay. Really, really cool color.
So I saw a question somebody had. Let me see if I can find it again. Pete was talking about how to tune them, but I think he's referring to the old, like the old style screw-in design, which I still have a ton of.
Oh, okay.
And a lot of guys do have them because they've stocked up and they still
Yes.
have them.
So a lot of times, if you have a prop that isn't turning on the bait, it probably has gotten some angel hair or what we call fine moss that's gotten up underneath along the prop shaft and butted up against the washers. That's usually the case. And to get that out, couple things that I do is I'll take you remember those little tiny pipe cleaners? They're really,
Yeah.
really petite. I'll take one of those, hold the bait, and I'll just rub it. And those little brushes get in there and clean that out. And you can spin it. And then I'll spray it with oil just to make sure that I've cleaned it out, because maybe it's some other debris in there too that's dried. If you find, for example, you left it on your kid's craft table and he dropped glue up in it or something like that, you can take a razor, a straight edge razor, and run it on the bar, against the bar, and just run it and cut on that. And you can cut away whatever debris that's dried onto that prop shaft. And that usually stops it. In the old models, I was really excited about the old models. We went through a phase, unfortunately, where we got a rash of them that did not, that were faulty. Basically the prop was, the screws weren't embedded into the mounting block. And it was a really innocent mistake. We moved from factory to factory to one factory, and I'm going to guess that, you know, some people didn't leave their city and go to that factory, right? So we had some new employees that were, you know, getting adjusted, but we had a rash of them that came out where the screw wasn't bedded. Once the screw's bedded into the mounting block, you have no fail. I mean, so we had, I don't know, 100,000. I don't know what we had that had no issue. But then we started getting a few that did. So we decided to get rid of that idea altogether. Now, the bad part about that was I was teaching guys how to modify the spin bait. Like, you could unscrew them,
Mm-hmm.
and then you could remove the thrust washer. You could remove the prop, screw it back on, and I can change the profile of the bait instantly by removing one prop. Just the size of the bait would be reduced. So that was kind of the cool thing about it. Since then, you know, I can teach you other ways of doing that. In fact, I'm going to be doing a video, hopefully in the next few weeks. It's going to be a real comprehensive video on.
You almost said the next few years.
No, I meant Well,
You must be tired.
well, yeah. So last night was 3 hours sleep, but hey, I'm here.
So they went to the I class, which now it's already set. You don't have to worry about doing any tuning to it at all.
Yeah, you can't really tune it of any sort. There's a berth in the prop shaft, and that berth is a little bit elongated, and that's so that you can actually take that bait and that prop and you can move it and clean it and give that prop and that prop shaft clearance again, because sometimes you'll be fishing in real mossy that fine moss area, and you don't even notice it. The props go through it, hit it, and then it beds up on that prop shaft, and you're kind of like, until you get in, you're like, wait a minute, the bait is turning and not the prop. So that's usually what the issue is. But who was it? It was Pete.
Yeah, Pete Alex.
Yeah, if he has any problem, I will be glad to help him out in any sort of way. So you can let him know for sure.
Outside of the Great Lakes colors, David wants to know, what do you think are the go-tos? I have 3 that are 100% the first things I throw: chartreuse gill, prism gill, and the ghost minnow. Those are like my 3 bread and butter non-Great Lakes colors. But from all the guys you talk to, because you talk to everybody wants to be your buddy. So what do you hear from guys that tend to be, popular colors?
Well, I am one of those guys that really does try to help the guys out. And if a pro is doing really well on a certain color and he doesn't, he tells me about it, and he says, I don't want to talk about it, then I try to honor that. I mean, I would do that for anybody, David Fish or you or anybody, during that process. But I sometimes go back and revisit that with them. And I'd come back and say, Justin, would it be okay to talk about it now? Because I do want to give guys the greatest opportunity. What I do know is not everyone's going to spy bait all the time. Yep. And not everyone is at the same level in doing it. So it's not like you're going to be competing against, 200 spy baiters when you go out and fish. And I have a cute story about that. But to answer David Fish's question, the colors that I like are ghost minnow, that Wagasaki shad or Komochi shad, Komochi Wagasaki, green smelt, BKIU, they're sure-ins. Morning Dawn, which is not a true Morning Dawn color as we know it, is a very, very effective color. Prison Gill is a really good color. It really is. Like I sometimes will just throw that color.
I have a few that are pretty worn out in that color, and chartreuse gill. There's not much paint left on them.
M Shad, Ghost M Shad is another color, really, really good, for the Great Lakes. And out of those, what is it?
Is it this?
That right there is I'm not going to mention his name, is one of my friends who's a long-term pro. That's his favorite color. He uses that color quite a bit.
I know one guy. He is basically responsible for almost every one of that color sales in SDI for a few years there. Like that is, and he's a Canadian. He came across and bought that one color.
Well, I'll tell you, some of the Canadians, I can talk about some of the Canadians actually like some of the reflective patterns. They fish like Semco and stuff, and so the reflective patterns against the grass lines have worked. That rainbow trout color, the Iwaki color. I mean, there's been several reflective pattern colors that have done really, really, really well against grass lines. But again, I look at reflective patterns as, how am I going to get that particular color to do the most damage? I mean, in a good way. And so it may be what I call during breach time. So when you got the sun just cresting over the hill, hitting the water, that would illuminate that color, but yet the water is still dark. You know what I mean? The sun is hitting the surface area, but the water still. That's a great time to throw reflective pattern.
When do we throw this color?
Yes, that color is elusive. I call it. I've caught some of my biggest smallmouth, 614, a 7-1. out west on that color. And I can't tell you exactly why that is. I just know that the big fish don't play sometimes with that color at all. They crush it. And then I'll go all day on average fish and just do, so on it. Have a good day, but nothing like that's aha. But if I'm around giant fish, like if I know that there's giant fish in an area, I have that color because for some reason they want to break that color in half. I don't actually know why that is, but I don't catch a lot of fish. But if I am around big fish, if I know that I've seen or frequented an area where there's giant smallmouth, I do have that in my box ready to roll for sure.
The only time of the year I've done well with that color, and this is what's weird, is it's only like a small 30 to 40 minute window during the mayfly hatch. Like once the sun is basically above the horizon till about say 30 minutes, 40 minutes above the horizon, then it just shuts off. And the same is true for running like pink on a drop shot. Like that's a small little bite window during the mayfly hatch. I don't understand it, but I've just stumbled upon it, and I'm like, okay, I get one or two fish, and then the bite's done because that sun's changed. And
Yeah,
I wonder if it's something to do with like the UV penetration. Something happens with that shade maybe, and it
yeah.
does something for them. I'm not sure.
Certain water, that color stands out. Certain sediment, let's say cloudy, less visual water, that bait stands out less. But all I know is that it is a big fish color. The guys up in the Lake Lanier area,
Yeah.
there's a handful of them that know about that color very well, and have done very well on it for sure. And all these colors that you're seeing are always in transition to me. This is one of the reasons I brought Aaron on board too, is we can tweak these things slightly and improve them. Let's just say that one color works really well, but it needs to be darker and it's going to work even better. At this point in time, Duo has allotted me at least that process to submit that request for further consideration, because my goal is always to improve what we have out there. Now, some things you can improve. They're just deadly. So you can't improve them, or the color isn't that great and you can't improve them.
So I noticed a few things on Duo International site that caught my eye. We're not going to talk about that. I still have yet to get my hands on that guy. I think it's cute as hell, and I know it catches fish.
Mm-hmm.
But what the heck is this?
No mas say. So those are plastic baits that have a weight insert in them and a molded ring. So where you see that hook is actually going through a ring that's embedded in the body. And you throw these out. They're just very loose and how can I say it, lifelike in a way. And you can kind of pull them, and they almost worked almost like a blade bait a little bit. They'll kind of shudder as they're coming up. You can lift them and drop them. You can lift them and kind of hold them in a position and reel them, and then you can drop them again. But they're pretty lifelike, and I actually use them. Not a whole bunch, but I've used actually smaller hooks than these guys do on them. And my goal is to try to put them and stair step them actually, and that's how I end up fishing them quite a bit on stair step. This is one of my friends, Nishizumi-san, who is also a guide on Lake Biwa, who's talking about it, and he is really partial to this bait. So it's probably worth it. But you see where the hook placement is. So if you start to apply force there, you're actually going to have a place where the bait is going to break away sort of or flex, and that's in the tail region, which becomes really really fluid.
Would this have some bed fishing applications here?
Sure, yeah, sure. That's a no mas gill. That's a bigger version.
It's got some decent weight to it, so it could be interesting.
And so these are soft plastic baits that have lead inserts in them that you can kind of do the lift and fall or stroll with them and allow yourself to kind of present. And you can present and hold with these baits effectively. So bed fishing for sure, it would be a kick in the pants. I haven't personally bed fished with that lure. That's the bigger one. There's another one called the Nomasi Gill Shad, which has a paddle tail on it. And that bait you can kind of pull around, that little sitting paddle tail kind of kicks like a little bluegill. So
that looks like a rock bass and a yellow perch slayer to me, buddy. That's what that looks like to me. It just screams rock bass eat me, big jumbo perch eat me in the fall. I might have to get my hands on some of those for this fall.
Yeah, this gives us this kind of is a segue into a lot of the Japanese shore angler presentations. But some of these, I can't remember what the gram weight on this one is that you have, but it's
8 gram on the screen.
8 grams.
It's a little hard to read, yeah.
It's pretty light, right? But
quarter ounce roughly.
But the deck, what was the Deca? The Deca was how many grams?
5/8 of an ounce, I think it was at 18 grams.
Yeah, so that one, for example, has a little bit more application for deeper water, longer.
Now, does that have 2 hook placement points on it? It looks like. It's got like one here and then one there.
Yeah. You can move. You can definitely put hooks in different areas in that.
Okay, that is unique. Now, the other big one that you sent me, are they like production prototypes, we can call them? That little care package you sent me in the middle, like towards the end of winter. On these guys?
Yeah. So, well, not that, because that's coming. It was the Apex Tune.
Apex Tune. I just saw Apex and I got excited. Sorry.
Yeah, no. So there's the Apex 100, which is a big one. The Apex 85 is coming. We're doing the R&D on that. That's going to be another big one. The Apex Tune. So I don't know how long your guys are going to be here. If they're willing to be here until 3 o'clock in the morning, definitely talk lures and fish behavior. And they should know by now, if they've ever had a conversation with me, this is what I enjoy doing. I'll talk about the Apex Tune because I honestly, I want guys to fish this lure. I honestly want them to. The lipless market is a saturated market. It's no joke. There's hundreds of lipless baits or versions. You can catch fish in early year on nearly every single lipless bait you ever got. So if you get a 99-cent one or you get a $15 one, you can pretty much early in the year, if it has rattles and chamber, pretty much catch fish if you can cast it and get it to its areas. That's why they used to call it an idiot bait. It's just a cast and retrieve bait. But when you start getting into pros using these lures, and they start to be very selective about what lures seem to help them get the big bite or help them prolong their bite in the tournament. So what I'm getting at is 15 years ago, I did some research, and that research was on, it was pretty simple hypothesis. I believe that the profile of a lipless lure was one of the most perfect profiles a lure could have. If you think about it, it's nearly perfect in shape. And so my question was, how come I only catch fish in the pre-spawn, or I only catch fish on the fall end? And this is traditional. Now, you'll hear some guys say, yeah, I fish it all the time. Okay, very, very, very few people do. But what I'm getting at, the majority of folks who tournament fish know early year and fall is when you throw a lipless bait most of the time. And there's good reason. There's acoustics, there's what we call percussion, there's vibration, this fluency that comes from the bait, the signatures of the bait. They really cater to the early presentation and the later seasonal presentations. So I was doing some research, several layers in this. One was observing fish. And I could pull sound from a certain bait and pull vibration from a certain bait. Add vibration. I may add oil or water to the lure cavity. I may take more or less rattles. I may use different materials for the balls that create the rattling. But I was changing basically this lure as we were getting into the season. Early year, it didn't matter. You could almost catch fish on any rattling bait.
Yep.
But as you got into the later in the season, the fish would start to behave differently. And what I'm talking about is I had a test location. The control was very well set. It was a high population of fish from quite a bit of a wide range of development, meaning I had some trophy fish there as well as some medium-sized fish as well as some young fish in this group. They had ambient sound and they had soft ambient sound, meaning like there was current and compressing against areas and there was no current. So what I'm getting at is my control area was pretty wide. It was probably a quarter of a mile. It was a secret area that I could study fish for several months in a year. And early in the year, everybody would eat a lipless bait. As soon as the sun stayed out longer and the water temperature rose and the transparency, meaning the visual acuity of these fish would increase because they could see further into the water, those fish would start to do what we call profiling. And that's kind of maybe a more Western term sometimes, but basically the fish looks at the bait and he starts to laugh at you. Got it? Goodbye.
Yep. It gets conditioned.
And yeah, and it is. And so there is a behavioral construct that takes place in this. But what was interesting was some of these fish, I'm gonna hint to a little bit, but some of these fish really did want to eat the lure. Their drive, their predatory response, they had a high prey drive. If I presented another lure with, for example, a softer signature, I would catch that same fish. But with the lipless bait, they couldn't fully commit. So we went from committed to not committing at all to I really do want to eat it, but so they would end up punching the gill plate on the lure to try to stun it in order to get it to eat. The more I could soften the behavior of that lure, the more I could get them to commit an additional step. And so I was working in modifications of different lures to do that. Eventually, I got those fish to eat consistently. And that's what I'm getting at.
Is that due to the reduction in that rattle chamber, toning that down to almost nothing and just relying on the actual like vibration movement of the bait itself?
In part it is. The other part was changing the vibration. And not so much, we hear the term vibration, it's used loosely, but it was actually changing the percussion, this kind of concussion, this compounding rhythm that comes through the body when the body is shaking. So you can do that through weights and sound, or you can do that through countermeasures, meaning components that are counteracting the movement of the bait. So if the weight swings to one side, the body swings to another side, you'll get a thump. Hence the one knocker sounds, those type of things. So, but if I could increase the percussion, the actual vibration in the lure, yet make the lure more natural or more sinuous, so it wasn't fighting heavy resistance. When you get a lure with a lot of surface area and you start dragging it through the water, that surface area starts applying. And as that bait starts to push, it pushes and displaces and gives out this vibration. Well, if that tension, if I can say that resistance is very, very heavy, you get a lot of feedback, but not necessarily the intensity or the level of feedback that you need. I'm hoping I'm not getting too off chart here as far as complicated. What I was looking for was, if I may give you an analogy, I was looking for you being able to put a bumblebee in your right hand and a tiny little pebble in your other hand and shake them and then wait and see which one gave you more concussion, more percussion in response. Well, the bumblebee would buzz, right? It'd be a deep, low frequency buzzing. So that's what I'm getting at. So my research ran along those lines. I can't talk about it in great detail, but it basically ran along those lines. And I got a lot of valuable data. And as I was modifying lures to the point that whether a weight was, whether a BB was in there or not, I was getting a certain vibration. I started to catch way more fish. So now let me fast forward. So this was in the back of my head, and I was sharing this with Aaron, and Aaron has a tremendous amount of experience with our lures. He said, here's the good and the bad of our vibration 68s and our vibration 68 G fixes, which everyone knows is a great bait. But we decided to use that profile because that profile Mr. Adachi made, I don't know, I'm going to say that he knew, but it's a brilliant profile. It can't, the vibration from that lure cannot be duplicated with another lure. Like, you know, another lure brand cannot duplicate that vibration. It has its own signature. So we decided to use that body form because that body form shedded water extremely efficiently. And then we changed the running posture, and then we changed the vibration and got the frequency that we wanted and worked on acoustically what we wanted to see from the bait. Now I'll fast forward a little bit more. I tested that bait for quite a while. It was hard to do because you don't have a lot of material to work with in that shape. It's very thin. It's the thinnest lipless bait in tournament fishing. So you don't got a lot of material to work with. But what ended up happening was we hit the mark of what we were trying to accomplish. And that's why out of all the people in the world, 2 of us are super excited about this lure. I joke about this because like some of the Japanese guys are kind of like, or some of the guys in Japan are like, oh, that's great. Hey, listen, great that you know, David, good job that you really like that. Okay, we're going to go on now. But it really is a sensational achievement, especially in a saturated market. So I took 3 guys. These 3 guys have actually done damage on Pro-Am circuits. One guy was a 12-year veteran, fished Pro-Ams, won quite a bit of money. Also had fished up to 12 or more U.S. Opens. I took another guy that won a Pro-Am event. I took another guy that had won several boats and did really well on the Pro-Am side. So these guys are no slouch. And we went to an area that would be predictable. Here's what I'm getting at. The water transparency was 18 inches, meaning if you dropped the lure in the water at 18 inches, that lure would disappear, okay? So that would tell you instantly, as an experienced angler, well, I better get some color in that lure, right? And we're talking about early in the year. So these guys came out with the crawfish pattern, which I would have used. That would have been my default to either as well. And they chose the vibration bait that they wanted to use, that they were confident with, that they had won tournaments with that they'd done well on. They chose those. And what we did is we fished side by side. We fished him up front and me behind, and then me up front and him behind. And then I gave him my lure and he gave me his lure, and we changed. And we fished for 12 hours. 1 angler, 2 anglers, 3 anglers. After that, if you can imagine that 12 hours, that's 36 hours of fishing, switching positions, alternating baits. The whole time, the only lure I used was the Apex tune in a transparent color, meaning it would not be seen by our eyes in the water because of the stained the propensity of the stain cover. So we didn't really have the right, I didn't really have the right lure that I would use in a tournament. What I'm getting at is the reason I did that is because I didn't want the color to be the factor. I wanted only the vibration to be the factor. The outcome was I caught bigger fish and more fish over the continuum of the day. So okay, you do that once, it's kind of like, well, that's pretty cool. You do that twice, you're kind of like, I think I'm onto something. You do that 3 times, and you're like, I am onto something. And again, the focal point here was getting this lure to emit a certain level of vibration, which can't be easily duplicated by anybody else because of the size, the profile, and the shape of the lure. It was that powerful of an experience. So, yes, I'm probably the only one that's excited about this, but I am on a number of. I mean, I caught 24 pounds one day of smallmouth on it, and I caught like 25 pounds not the next day, but the next trip that I did on it, and basically using the same lure. I used the same lure until it was a totally transparent lure, mind you. in dingy water. And I use that lure again. All I'm trying to do is find out whether or not the vibration is effective. So what I'm getting at with this lure is you're going to be able to fish this lure year long. You're going to fish it. Guys are going to grab it for ice fishing, guaranteed. They're going to grab it for early year fishing. They just want to get the colors that they want to match up. If they decide that they are one of those anglers that I use lipless baits all year long, I'll especially use them on windy banks where I've got a lot of water pushing against a rocky bank and tearing up that bank. I'll definitely use a lipless during that, and that could be right in the middle of July when I'll do that. I definitely do that. I catch fish. I've done well in tournaments doing that, so that's been kind of an insider for me. But I also know I don't get a ton of fish doing that. I can't duplicate that over days of time. This lure is going to allow me to continue to fish throughout the year, into the fall, into the late. I don't do any ice fishing, but this lure is already going to help the ice fishermen. I guarantee it. There's one Canadian angler who entrusted my verbiage and decided to go out and try it, and he came back with he was very surprised, and the water temperature was well below the 40s. It was like 39, that kind of deal.
Mm-hmm.
Super cold water, and he was stair stepping and lifting and dropping, but he was catching fish, and that to him was a telltale, because he uses certain baits to do that. So does it have kind of that blade bait effect? Yes, kind of. But it is completely unique. So I'm super excited about it on a number of levels. It is definitely one of my absolute favorite lures now out of the Duo Realis lineup. But again, it has science that came about, and it also has Aaron's experience. Now, Aaron's been a professional angler for 25 years, not a regular weekend warrior, right?
Yeah.
So we're talking about some pretty intensive type of gray matter getting to where it needed to go. This guy is one of the most cerebral anglers out there. And he really, really got on board with this. So the other consequences, because of some of the changes and ramifications that we ran through with this lure comes through cover better. It can slide rock. It can vibrate, count rock. It can come through cover a lot more efficiently. It can be retrieved at basically any speed, so you can moderately slow it down, and then you can also burn it. Its castability. There was some sacrifice in actual casting in comparison to the G-Fix model, but remember the G-Fix model is 3/4 of an ounce.
It's a heavy bait.
Yeah, it's an
profile.
extremely heavy bait.
You can throw that thing pretty damn far on St. Clair.
Mhm.
And that was the first lipless from you guys I used, was the 68 G-Fix.
Yeah.
And I can't remember the color of it. I still have it. Was crushing fish post-spawn during the mayfly hatch. And I was actually burning it at the surface when these fish were actually up feeding on the mayflies and the shiners at the surface, and I was having really good luck.
Yeah.
Actually, in Lance Cruz Bay, I have no problem telling the spot.
The 68 G-Fix and the 62 G-Fix really do have their place. And again, I have to give credit to Mr. Adachi, one, for allotting us time and effort to do this, bringing this concept together with Aaron and us doing this. It's kind of like this science project gone great. What happens in the field depends on the anglers who want to endorse this, but if you're talking about a great lipless bait, I would say get the 68. You don't have to get any other one. Just get the Apex Tune 68, get the colors that you need, and go start pounding the territory with that. And you're going to find out really quickly how effective that lure is. It is amazing, especially in the world. And I come from the mid 90s, multiple different JDM lipless baits and multiple popular lipless baits that we have here in the States. So it's not like I'm vacant of experience in regards to lipless cranking.
So since you are the JDM master, Jedi Splinter, whatever you want to call it, of North America, What JDM sexiness are you hiding from us? Even if it's not Duo, just something you're like totally geeking out over. I know of one big bait you love.
I
I'll never fish because I can't afford it, but
yeah,
it is
so
gorgeous.
I've been blessed to work with. I've got a lot of Japanese friends in the industry, and at some capacity, I've worked with them well before I worked with Duo. Well before I signed on with Duo, so I've been really lucky that way. I've developed some really dear friendships, and in that, one of my good friends is Mr. Takayama. He is the inventor of Roman Made, and the big bait specialists, those guys that throw big hard baits, they all know about the Roman Made lure line, from the negotiator all the way up to the mother. And the mother is, $480, $500 lure. Depending on where you get it. There's different color patterns, premium. There is some unique color patterns, but it's a beautiful lure. It really is the first big bait that had S-stroke or S-curve capability. S-curve and S-stroke really kind of came from the Japanese. It wasn't that us in the U.S. didn't have two-piece baits. It was just that the Japanese took what we had and refined it and really made it better. So, now we call that, in the US, we call it glide baits. But long before it was called a glide bait, it was S-stroke, S-curve technology. But the Japanese have done a really, really good job making a bait behave that way. Now we've got garage operations out here that have adopted the concept as well. But Mr. Takayama was probably by far the first to take a giant bait. Now, the mother was considered a giant bait. So big was the mother when I introduced it to America that the mother, you can find the mother online. They're ripping and selling those things for $700-800. But so great was that bait. There wasn't a rod really designed for that bait. What I mean, somebody may scream and holler, "Oh, I put together a saltwater rod, a water blank, and then put some guides on it." But there was not a rod designed for that lure.
The closest stuff that we probably have here in the States is the musky stuff. That's
Sure.
the closest stuff we got to a true big swim bait rod. But those are more designed for the big rubber, pounders, Medusas. They're just casting and cranking. They're not doing anything else with it.
Yeah, Mr. Takayama's rod line is called Centurion rods, and in my opinion, those are, and this is just my opinion, those are the best swim bait rods on the market by far. And here's the reason why. Mr. Takayama designed the rod to be casted so that the rod loads the lure and the lure is then projected outward. It also was designed to load and to absorb for fighting the fish. A lot of guys make a rod that has a big handle, a stiff butt, all the way out to the midsection so that they could just launch that big lure. Mr. Takayama's rods actually are designed to manage the fish in the fight. So really, really cool designed rods. They come into the States every once in a while. I think there's some that are for negotiators right now. The breast rod there's a few available. A store by the name of Carolina Fishing Tackle carries a lot of Roman Made stuff.
Yeah, when you Google that and look at the images, a lot of the URLs are going to those guys.
So I will show you. I wish this was mine to throw. Mine is actually at a store. I've lent it out to a store so that they could showcase it. This one is actually for a customer eventually that is has namesake and all over it. But this is the Roman Made Mother Chaser. The Mother Chaser is basically 1.5 pounds.
Big bait.
So if you can imagine, that's like 680 grams or something.
That is a keeper largemouth for those in the South.
If I remember correctly, it's like 39 centimeters or 38 centimeters long, which is like what, 15 plus inches, 15.16 inches or something like that. It's
Yep.
recommended for 60-pound fluorocarbon. Monofilament probably around 45 to 50 pound, depending on shock factor. Adaptable hooks for it would be like the owner's ST46s, 2Os. But I'm going to pull this out so that you can see this.
It's a nice wood box, but we all want to see the lure, David.
Well, and exactly. Just so that you know, it has nice foam on it. Oh.
The anticipation is growing.
Unmolested.
That's like a mantelpiece, the way it's set up like that in the box. That's gorgeous, man.
Well, and you know, the funny thing is kind of, there's a lot of guys. I just saw this on eBay for $2,000. The mother chaser. It retails in the States for about $1,000. I'm going to try to unrest this booger out of this coffin that it is in.
Don't drop it. You don't want to be the one to get the first scratch in it.
Yeah. The guy hates me for life, right?
Exactly.
I can't offer him I don't think I'll be able to offer him a spin bait either. I don't think he'll go for it.
No, I don't think that's going to offset the scratch in the mother there.
Yeah, even if I told him it was a collector's, right?
Exactly. Now, speaking of collectors, while you're getting that out there, are any of those cool jerk baits that have that Japanese artwork gonna make it their way to the States?
When you say cool jerk bait,
don't make me go find it on Instagram now.
Yeah, I think I may have to default to that.
Yeah, let me go pull it up.
What's the denotation to cool? There are some colors that have been kind of characteristic for the Japanese market.
If I remember right, it's something to do with Japanese heritage. This artwork. Here, I got it up. I think. Nope, wrong window.
Okay, so here is the mother chaser.
That is an awesome bait, man. Just gorgeous.
So the mother, the original Roman-made mother, is
it 12? Roughly?
12 inches. Yeah. So that would be about right there. And this one is
looks like a keeper.
15 inches.
That's a keeper bass, man.
So it was kind of funny, guys. When I first introduced this to the U.S., guys were saying, really, there's no fish that would ever eat that. That's way too big. How do you even get that mass of wood to move? If I broke it down for you, you would be blown away how much effort has gone into the ballast system in this bait. The angles that you see in this bait are specific to the action of the lure. I mean, it's no joke. So this thing that almost weighs 2 pounds is designed to actually swim in water and catch fish. Most recently, just 2 days ago, I had a big bait angler send me pictures. I'll post them on Instagram or on my Facebook soon. But he caught a big striper on it, and he caught a big bass on it. There was a young kid by the name of Michael. He did a little video. He was one of the first to catch a bass in the U.S. Off of the mother chaser, and I think it was around 6 pounds or 7 pounds. There are other guys that are already on it trying to do that. So big bait, it will catch fish. When I had this bait in prototype with Mr. Takayama, I caught fish on it. I didn't count those as being the first fish caught in the U.S. It was really that's really left to these guys to do the damage. But you're going to see some really big fish being caught on this bait for sure.
So this is the paint jobs I was referring to. Forgive my ignorance and Americanness, but I know it has something to do with their heritage.
Yeah, I'm gonna talk for you. It is my ignorance. They've come out again and again with these. I don't know much about them except that they were supposed to be a limited edition. They were tied to anniversary process. and that's really all I really know about it.
They're gorgeous. I love the detail to do that on that bait is not easy. I mean, it's not a flat surface that they're doing that on.
Yeah.
It's exceptional.
Yeah. So it definitely is a celebratory event, and we've also have some lures that are now, how can you say this, shrouded in wood casings too, that get minted as limited editions as well. So that falls under that line for sure.
Okay. It just was cool. I was enjoying watching. You know, they were doing a big. I don't know if it was yours or one of the Duo Instagrams that I follow. There's several of them. Was actually showing like the painting process on it. I thought it was just really cool to check to see it. I like watching the process of making, you know, lures more than anything. I may not understand what the hell you're doing, but I'm like mesmerized, like how like how it's made. I'll sit there and watch those videos for hours because I just like watching the process.
If you guys are interested in that kind of stuff, and again, I'm not trying to sell the lure. I'm just saying if it really does interest you, lure design, building of lures, some of that heritage, some of that ambiance or whatever, nostalgia around lures. We do have a Duo channel, and there are some videos that kind of go into lure construction sequences. It's for entertaining value, you know, paired with music, etc. But it is kind of cool to see that. It really is. You know, I'm a meat and potatoes type of angler, so I'm looking at, hey, how can I make this lure better? How can I make the fish bite it? You know, so so I am definitely hyperactive and directional on my lure development side. But some of the stuff that you're seeing, you know, that Justin's putting up is really cool stuff to take a breather and just appreciate. We've had Mr. Adachi work on some colors and then write his signature on those colors, and we've given those away as gifts. I'm going to probably do that again this year at some point in time.
Explain that, and when will it be here? Because if you want to get into ice fishing, that's the way to do it right there.
Yeah, you know,
a cool little piece of plastic. I like that.
Well, it's kind of funny you mentioned that because I've had guys say, "Hey, man, you need to come out and do some ice fishing." I'm like, you don't want me out doing ice fishing. If I fall in, you can just go ahead and go home because I'm dead already.
We'll put a float suit on you. Don't worry. You'll bob around like a bobber.
I'm like, yeah, exactly. He fell in. Just go ahead and go home. We're gonna go have dinner. I mean, it's done. Yeah, I don't do so well in the cold. I try to fake it, but yeah, you'll see me dressed. I look like the Michelin Man in springtime. I have like this big old, well, you know, guide wear. You remember the insulated guide wear?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I'm wearing that plus layers.
Must be the soccer player in you coming out when it gets cold, right?
Yep, exactly. Exactly.
For those that don't you used to do what before you made lures? Briefly.
I used to fantasize about, you know, my job was going to be two things. I was going to play professional soccer, and I was going to have a bass boat, and I was going to bass fish. Those were the only two things I was going to do in life. There wasn't anything else. I wasn't going to feed a dog. I wasn't going to do anything else. And so I went from high school to did very well in high school soccer and ended up making it on a college team, and then set some records on that college team, and then moved to go play. I wanted to say go fish, go play professional soccer, and actually the league had folded my year that I graduated. The league had actually folded, so we didn't even have a draft. So I had to sit out for quite a while and try to keep in shape and do these things that you know 1,500 sit-ups and all this other stuff that we used to try to do to stay into shape, and then hope that the league was going to come back in the U.S. And it did. It came back in the U.S. There was bonds bought per state, and so I ended up playing in what they called the American Professional Soccer League, and I had a great experience. I ended up tearing a muscle, And when you tear muscle, it's probably one of the worst things you can do as an athlete because it does not adhere correctly. It usually lays over and becomes scar tissue, a layer of scar tissue. So unfortunate that happened, but I don't regret any moment of my soccer career. It was such a humbling honor and experience. I got to play with people from all over the world. I think I played on a couple different teams against some of the top Mexican pro teams, Chivas and a couple other ones. So I mean, I got to do some amazing stuff, and so I'm very, very honored. And I played a decent game too. I played a decent game, but it was a challenge, you know, when you injure yourself in such a capacity, because then you have to start thinking about some other things. So, oh my gosh, you got to get a real job, right? You know. So, but again, I was honored. But you know, my other passion has always been fishing, and people always ask me like, well, how did you get into fishing? Well, if you knew me as a child, you would be surprised that I even got into fishing. I was born basically on the streets of Chicago. My mom and I came from some pretty rough situations. And then we ended up moving to LA. Out of LA, I ended up moving a little bit north, and some crazy families decided that they would take me fishing. And I probably was like the worst person to babysit. I don't know. But anyways, they took me camping with them, and I think I got into trouble was what happened. I actually got into trouble. So they took a 5-gallon bucket, sat it at the lake's edge, casted out a line, baited line for me, told me to sit and stay, and hand me a rod and put it in my hand. And then all of them went back to the campfire. So I don't think they did that because they were really appreciating how kind and calm I was.
So Phil's got a question for you.
Sure.
It's on the screen there. What is your all-time most prized and proud of lure in your time with Duo?
Duo. Okay. Wow.
I got a feeling it's not necessarily about the design, but more of the execution of getting it in angler's hands. At least in my mind, that would be one of your highlights.
Yeah, gosh, I have some affinity for a couple different lures. I don't know if I can nail it down to one. I mean, obviously spy baiting, but that's a concept, right?
Yep.
So spy baiting was a powerful thing. I was so happy to see people adopt this because I saw so many. And when I say this, I'm not lying. Well over 100 personal bests. Anglers were calling, messaging me, saying I caught my personal best fish on it. So to me, that was so rewarding. I appreciate that. I used to trophy hunt. I had some unofficial lake records. I've had official state record. I know what it is to put in time and work to achieve the level that you want in fishing. So so that concept spy baiting, but lure project. I would say the G87, which Mr. Adachi allowed us to contribute in the way that he asked, you know, what did we want in a lure? The G87 is amazing lure. It is arguably the best deep diving crankbait on the market.
Is that that's the big boy, right?
Yeah, that's a big boy. It's about 1.25 ounces. But you know, I've compared, I don't know, like 30, 40, I don't know how many now, but so-called deep diving crankbaits to the G87, and the G87 outshine those crankbaits. If those crankbaits were the same weight dimensions as the G87 or slightly heavier, the G87 would outcast them anywhere from 30 to 70 feet, linear feet.
I remember when that came out and just could not get guys willing to throw such a big bait out here on St. Clair.
Yeah.
Consistently. I think that was the only thing, but gorgeous piece of artwork. Like that's functional artwork beyond belief, that bait.
Yeah, so Mr. Adachi did an amazing job. I have so much respect for him in this lure. Now this lure costs, you know, probably 2 or 3 family incomes to create the mold, etc. So I don't even think I've gotten my money back on it. But if a tournament angler wants something that was just extremely surgical and deadly, the G87 would be it. Here's something that, excuse me, I can talk about now. I was sworn to secrecy a couple of years ago. On St. Clair, there is a deep diving crankbait bite that is well established now, and tournament anglers are winning on it. I couldn't say anything before, but I ask, after the year or the season's over, can I talk about it? If they tell me no, then I say no, and then I don't. But if they say, yeah, you can talk about it now, then I talk about it. And that bite is there on St. Clair. Those guys, you guys that are really expert anglers, you're onto something. If you start to explore that bite, it is there. This lure comes in a 15 and a 20. It would definitely be worth the while to start experimenting with this lure. What the first thing you're going to notice about the G87 is it casts better than any other lure. If you're going to compare line diameter, rod reel, and lure size and weight size, that lure right there, that G87 is the best, in my opinion, the absolute best deep diving lure.
What weight line was this chart done? 14 or 17?
I think that one's on 14, I think.
14? Okay.
Yeah. The nice thing about the G87 too is it's a lure that you can use a wide range of rod actions and weights. If you throw some deep diving lures, depending on their size and weight, you can only use an 8.5-foot rod and 17-pound test. That's the only way you're going to be able to cast it effectively.
Yep.
Or work it effectively. The G87 allows you to use 20-pound test or 12-pound test.
And that's saying something for how heavy this bait is and how big its profile is. Do you throw it on a lighter line and know that it's not going to abuse that line too much is pretty remarkable.
I've thrown it on 12-pound test. It's my big fish lure. I mean, out of your standard not swim bait stuff,
yep,
it's my big fish lure. I have no qualms about that. By far, if I'm gonna go hunt big fish, that's the lure. There's other guys that are not used to it. This lure, if you roll it down into cover like rock, it will basically fall over or collapse, like flip over on its side, and so it breaks free. And for a half a second, you're like, where did the lure go? And it starts to banana skip on the bottom, and then it pops back up again. And we've done this through video to see this, but it's amazing. And then when you're trying to stay and count rock down there, it'll sit there. The bill of it will sit there. But yes, it's got a stabilization bill on it. That's that little area, that hole that you see. Air passes through there for casting purposes, yet stability to keep the bill from flexing. That bill not flexing is very important in the drive to get that bait to go down. So you have, honestly, a relatively light lure. I would probably say this is one of my favorite lures, just from beginning to end. It was a 2.5-year project. And Mr. Adachi did an amazing job, by far, amazing job.
It is a gorgeous, gorgeous bait. I'm a fan of just looking at it. As most Duo products, I just love looking at it.
And then I go back to the Apex tune. I hate to beat that horse over, but I honestly go back to that because that's going to be a completely unique product. Now, another bait that we came out with was the Spin Bait 100. People kept asking for a bigger bait. I get a little bit more scared the bigger we go, because the bigger you go, the harder it is to play with action. You got so much mass moving around. But we did a really good job. The 100 has enough action on it. As packaged right now, I changed my hooks out and I use 90 size hooks versus the 100 hooks. I like a smaller hook for that profile. But I've already caught some really good fish on it. That color that you see up in that chart, Justin, that color comes from some research. It's called CL Dace is what it's called. It's a really, really cool color when you see it in person. But you can kind of see it. You'll see a brown that rolls into and blends into that opaque and that blue iridescent that's kind of showing. Those actually collide, but they blend very well. So it gives off a really, really nice hue But in the picture, it's hard to see it because you're seeing white background coming through the bait. But it's an amazing bait. Yeah,
That's
and great color.
There's a lot of like shiner forage up in northern Michigan that color, like a sand shiner, or some of our black chin shiners, they have that color to them, and that's really that northern Michigan. Those really hidden gems that we have up in northern Michigan for smallmouth, that color should be killer up there.
Yeah, if we ever bring that color to the 80s, the 80s size, the 80s size, you're gonna see my box will have. I mean, I'll go to the factory and still it. I mean, it's just that color is going to be phenomenal. It really is. That 100 is a good bait. I have a quick story. This just happened just a few days ago. I was playing with the bait and I was trying different line diameters and stuff. And because I still, even though the bait's out, we've already done testing, we've put our stamp of approval on it. I still go back and I still look at different things on the bait. And so I was doing that, making some notes. And I took it out onto a river system and was casting it. And I noticed that the river system was higher than what it was several days ago, which means that probably snow melt contributed. And the color was dingy. So I put that lure in the ghost minnow pattern, and I started throwing it around. And I caught one of my biggest brown trout ever on that bait. And it was the coolest thing. Like, I watched this big brown trout, this big male. I wish I should have sent you a picture of it. I have video of it, but I watched this thing eat the bait. He totally engulfed the 100 mm and then kind of spit half of it out and got hooked, right? But the fight was on. Like, that thing thrashed. I have video of him thrashing around. I was helpless, actually, when he was thrashing around. There's nothing I could do with this guy. I get him in and I'm holding him, and he's all of 5 pounds plus, 6 pounds in that range. So then I weighed him, and he bumped the 6 pound scale, but he was kicking around. So I was like, I better let him go. So I let the guy go because I didn't want to tear him up. Where I was fishing was pretty jagged, but it was so cool. I mean, it was just kind of
that fish right there.
Yes, sir. That's it. Yeah. That's it.
It's a gorgeous fish, man.
Golly, yeah. And I'm not a trout fisherman. I'm not a trout fishing expert, but I've taken the spy baiting data in my notes from several years ago, because I'd incidentally catch walleye and I would incidentally catch trout. And so I've got notes on it. So I shared some of those notes with the walleye anglers several years ago. And there's walleye guys that spy bait, specifically spy bait for walleye, and do very, very well. They know exactly when that happens. A lot of times it's when they're coming in to spawn. And those guys are just doing that for those fish. So it's a pretty cool. But I kind of just adopted spy baiting towards trout fishing. I've caught some amazing trout doing it. I was on one of the trout pages, and I'm like, hey, guess what I do? I spy bait for trout. And those guys were like ankle biters, man. They thought I was trolling, and I was like, I was, I'm just excited. I'm like really excited about this. I'm like, if you were in my boat right now when we were catching trout, we would be, high-fiving over. And these guys are like, you're evil. You're trying to sell the spy bait to us.
You're selling plastic instead of an all-natural fly.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. So I was like, man, these guys, the trout guys are worse than the bass guys are. So,
I tell you what, some of my biggest catfish while fishing, like not targeting but catfish, have come on spy baits. And the funniest part is you'll have that 10 or 15 pound channel cat hanging on that tiny little treble hook on the back of an ADG fix. And you're like, how is that bait still together? Because that thing is just thrashing that little bait.
I had
more than a few times on St. Clair. That's especially the month of July in June, when those fish start to push out deep. You'll, like on the Canadian side, when it first opens up, you can find channel catfish suspended up with the smallmouth, just crushing bait fish.
Oh, that's awesome.
And it's right before their spawn or just after their spawn, depending on the time of the year, like where we're at in the lake. It's amazing.
That is awesome.
That a freaking bottom feeding fish that's blind as a bat can find that thing and actually hit it.
Yeah, I've caught him, man. I've caught him up to 8 pounds, I think. Maybe a little bit bigger, but around 8 pounds. I mean, I've caught bunches that were like 2 to 4s, but I've caught around 8 pounds. But we had a couple Japanese guys that flew in to fish with me, And it was really kind of cool because that's what we were there for, to spy bait. But they hooked like one that was like 6 pounds, and that thing just ripped them around like a ragged doll, and it was just so funny. But yeah, they're cool fish. Zona and Matt Lee, I guess one of the Lee brothers,
Jordan Lee
was talking about that. They were talking about how they were spy baiting, and a big old giant cat came up and took a peek, and then a big gigantic smallmouth came up and took another peek. And so that's one thing, when you're on something, is when you get multiple species going over and investigating what you're putting in the water. That's when you're on to something too.
I mean, I've caught giant perch in the St. Clair River throwing spy baits. I actually have, you sent me, it was probably 5-6 years ago, those old school, not really that great in your words, spy baits. Those little tiny ones.
Oh, the 60s.
Yeah. So
they're cool.
They're cool, but they catch the snot out of panfish.
Yeah,
they really do.
Yeah.
Especially in clear water, when they just want to follow it and track it. Bluegill, rock bass, yellow perch, and the 80, just the standard 80 catches so many yellow perch for me on St. Clair, on the St. Clair River. Yeah. There's this little deal that happens, and I'll spill this beans. I've been trying to get it to where I can do a video on it, but it's like my mission for the day was smallmouth, not perch fishing. So it's like, dang it, I want to get this video done. So, and then I come back to it, and it's already passed up. But up on the flats, off the side of the main river current, there's that sandgrass that forms. It looks like, or like eelgrass, we want to call it, for lack of better words. It's mainly wild celery that the diving ducks eat when it starts to come up. Okay. Well, the perch will be hiding out into that, and you can take that 80 and fish it on mono. That way it wants to ride high, and you just crank it right across those weeds, and those perch will come up and just crush it. And none of them are under 8 inches. So they're all eaters.
Wow.
So that's something that I stumbled upon it looking for smallmouth, trying to use some of Scott Martin's images from when he was here for the FLW tour. Because he went out with like lunkers, and there was some stuff that I recognized. I'm like, I know that spot. I need to go fish this right now, because the episode came out really quick after the event. Yeah. I'm like, I got to go see this. I haven't played in here. All I got was perch. That's all I got was perch. The bass were already gone, but that's fine. But it's something I got to play with some more before I really put it out in a video for guys.
No, you're onto it. When I was at Gunnersville for that FLW championship, I had a couple boats roll up to me, and the guy's like, "Hey, man, you're that spy baiting guy." And I was like, "Okay, I don't know if that's good, but we'll go with it." And he goes, "Yeah, did you get any?" And I had caught like 3 fish on it. It just wasn't dialed in, and I was like, I'm gonna have to be fishing a lot of grass to try to get these fish on this bait, and I have to fish deeper grass. And I didn't really know the lake that well, so I didn't know where these deeper edges may hold fish. There's 1,000 of those. So
yeah.
But I was fumbling around a little bit, and they go, "Yeah, man, we do really well on that spy bait." I'm like, "Oh, right on." And yeah, we put 25 pounds in the boat one morning, and well, you want to know how we did it? I go, "Well, of course I do." And
yeah, tell me.
and he was all like, I mean, he was just sharing his moment, but he's out there going, "Well, we were out there, and we were just strolling across the top of the grass with 20-pound test."
Oh yeah. That's not going to let it sink.
And so basically they were, like almost buzz baiting it, and oh man, we whacked them good doing that, and I said, well, right on, and but it is one of those techniques that they do out there in Gunnersville. That's how they adapted, the lure. And there's a lot of grass out there in Gunnersville, by the way. But
Phil,
good
Phil
stuff.
has another just awesome question for you, and I'll let you read it and see how you react to it.
Yeah, well, it is. I will say this: I don't have the greatest answer for you, Phil, because I just may sneak up there and steal your boat for a weekend, and you can find me. No, it is my goal to get up there to St. Clair. I really want to do that. I don't know how to. I actually have been asked several times to come and do a seminar. So I'm really considering that, and a spy baiting seminar where maybe I can help, maybe I can contribute. So I'm looking at that, and maybe I can stay for a few days extra and then fish, and it would obviously be an honor to fish with you. So
I got a spare room. I got a spare room. Just let me know.
So yeah, I'd love to. And the cool thing is the St. Clair guys have really been good to me. I have to admit that. I met a bunch of them. Actually, Wayne Macklin is one of our pro staff. He fishes St. Clair quite a bit, right?
Yep. He's one of the hammers.
Now Scott Dobson is one as well. He's one. Chad is one. Now before those guys were just fishing Duo Realis stuff, but the Michigan guys have been really kind and generous to me for sure. I love sharing stories with you guys. You guys have the best smallmouth fishery in the U.S. It's not even. I fish on a world-class fishery. It's no doubt. It's no doubt it's a world-class fishery. It's the best smallmouth fishery out west by far. There's nothing even remotely close. I know there's some lakes that have produced some big fish, but we have more quality fish, more of them. It's just a beautiful arena, but it doesn't compare to what you guys get to experience on St. Clair. I have a state record and 3 fish in the 7-pound class range, and I have another 3 fish or 4 fish that are bumping the 614s. I have probably 30 now fish in 6-pound range, and I have a whole slew of 5-pounders. And I know that your fishery even holds better fish than that. So. Yeah. So hats off to you guys. You guys have a battle. You need to keep that fishery and make sure that people are being diligent to take care of that fish, because you really do. You didn't have these world-class fish 25 years ago. You had the world-class fish just like the rest of us did. Those 4, 5s and 6s. Now your small fish. I'm joking, a little bit facetious. Your small fish are 5 pounds.
I mean, if you go out in St. Clair and get nothing but 3-pounders, you are angry with yourself.
Yeah.
You go anywhere else in the country, you get a sack of 3-pounders, just give me a kicker, I'm in the money. Well, out here, you're not even close to the money with 3-pounders.
Well, and that's just it. If I go out there and go fishing, you guys would be like, "Oh, let's make fun of David. We're gonna go put him in a sandbox and let him go catch 2 and 3 pounders." Be tickled, and I will. I'll be there kissing 2 and 3 pound fish.
Oh yeah.
And you have a fishery that has 6, 7s, 8s rolling around. And so yeah, you guys have one of the best fisheries definitely in the world. Canada has definitely one of the best fisheries obviously in the world too, as well. But I mean, I love where I fish for smallmouth. They've been really good to me. You guys need to really take care of your fishery. It is world class for sure.
So speaking of, well, not really speaking of, but I admire you as an industry person, because you are so willing to talk to people, and in a way, you're kind of one of my new age heroes in the fishing industry. So in a way, kind of a man crush, you could call it.
Yeah, I like that.
But you've been around this business a lot, almost as long as I've been alive. So you've seen it progress and change immensely. And you've got to have these guys in the industry that you look up to, that you think are your heroes, that, that maybe even some of these guys may not even, like, that watch my channel have no idea who they are.
Mm-hmm.
So who are those heroes in the industry to you that you have?
Yeah. I have a huge amount. Now, again, I probably come from a little bit different walk of life. I come from a professional athletic background. So I see things sometimes a little bit different. I don't necessarily think that's right. I'm just saying I see things a little bit differently. I have such respect for every single bass angler out there that has his pro card and is working his butt off. I have a huge amount of respect for those guys. Many of them are my friends. And in some way they are kind of quiet heroes of mine. I don't put them posters up in my room. But I have a huge amount of respect. People don't understand that I have some, how can I say this? I have some really, really critical things that I look at in professional sports, including professional bass fishing. But first and foremost, any guy that has said, I'm going to go and try to do this, my hat is off to them, especially if they try to do this on their own, from finding fish to competing. You know all the uglies in the sport. We don't have to go into that right now, but just on that sense, the professional bass angler who's really given his heart and soul in this, I can sit and be enamored by him for years. So I don't want to displace that. But probably when I look at the industry as a whole, there's certain personalities and people that we just forgot that they actually got this dang thing going.
They're the reason why we can do what we're doing now.
Yeah. And so, it's kind of like inventing fire, and so those guys are my heroes in the sense that they gave a place where not only created a market, where it not only created professional bass fishing, where it not only created TV bass fishing, but it gave the sport an identity, and then it continues to drive the sport. Without those guys in place, the sport would have holes in it, dramatic holes in it, in my opinion. So again, maybe I'm getting a little bit soft on this deal, but I'm really being honest about it. I've got some heroes. One guy was actually on your show not too long ago.
That's just a straight up man crush. Don't lie. That's just straight up. You're like, I want to have your baby.
Yeah, not that good. I mean, he's kind of sexy in his own way, but yeah, no.
Chicago boy to a Chicago boy.
Basically. Yeah. Zona to me, he's one of my heroes, and here's why. Mark Zona, not only does he carry, the gamey stuff, not only does he have this gregarious personality, and he can navigate himself through thick and thin. He really, really can. He's actually a pretty tough kid and durable, but he's also a very, very intelligent man. And people miss it because they see the humor and the slapstick kind of humor that he can portray, but he actually is a very, very good fisherman. He is a layered thinker, a pretty deep thinker. He's a smart man. And not only that, he actually holds a house down too, right? So,
yep.
So there's quite a bit that this guy, he's just a huge skill set. But he's come from not the top. He came from down here somewhere and climbed up there and made it happen. And the whole time that he was progressing up his ladder and his achievement, he hasn't forgotten people. I admire that. He has picked up people along the way, threw them on his back, and carried them up.
I'm amazed that every time I run into him, I probably run into him like 2 or 3 times a year, and he's like, "Hey, what's up, Justin?" Like, I don't know how he remembers my name. I don't think I'm that memorable of a guy, but he's really personable. He always, like, if he's seen you once or twice, he knows who you are every time.
Yeah.
And Zona is one of those guys that you gotta love him, but sometimes he gets a little out there. Yeah. His personality, but it's good for the sport to have somebody that's like that, that's not Ike related, where it's over the top, exaggerated. Yeah. It's legitimate. His excitement is legitimate and not an act sometimes.
Well, and the thing is, he's much versatile than he even portrays. I mean, that guy could wear a suit and tie if he wanted to.
Yeah.
I mean, he definitely could. He is a very, very bright angler. Like, that's the other thing people don't. It's not just that he's casting or newscasting, about these anglers. He actually knows exactly what those anglers are doing sometimes.
Yep.
And he refrains from saying it, which is an act of brilliance and an act of pause and calm. And like I've always said it, a guy like that, He hasn't shown all his potential, but expect more from him. I mean, yes, his show can get going different directions and stuff, but definitely you can expect more from that guy. He is definitely one of my heroes, and I get enough opportunities to chat with him, which I'm honored about. I don't take that for granted. He's just a tremendous guy with great insight and more experience than people really realize. So
he's a good dude.
Get to know him, really get to know him. Some guys see him in play mode and they're like, oh, that guy can never be serious. Yeah. Holy smokes. Don't ask him to be serious. He can do that. He's very talented.
He's walked across a few stages with some nice bags in his days.
Yeah, yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Probably another one of my heroes is Steve Quinn. Steve Quinn is editor of In Fisherman. Many guys know him. He's been on the In Fisherman TV show. I honor Steve Quinn tremendously. Steve has been around a long time. He's done it, been there. He's got a scientific background, which I've enjoyed. I used to, as a kid, literally send him a letter and say, what do you think about smallmouth? Do you think that if you did a tracking study, they would move this far? And he was just always so gracious to me. I think he probably was like, this kid's got problems. We better get him some help. But he really did make my learning place in the sport comfortable and always well received. So I've always been honored by him. I'm always moved. He doesn't know it probably, but I'm always moved when I do get time to talk with him. He's a mentor in ways to me. He can say 3 words, and those 3 words sink into my soul, and I have to look at those things. So I enjoy him. Another one of my heroes, and maybe guys don't recall, or they do, but he used to be editorial staff of Bassmaster, was Ken Duke. Yep. Ken Duke is a brilliant man. I mean, a brilliant man. And he doesn't always, I think he has a little bit of an attorney background or something too, but he doesn't show all his guns, and he can play chess. And what I mean for the industry, you may hear him say something positive about the industry one time, and you may hear him say something negative about the industry. But if you didn't get to hear both of those conversations, you don't really realize how much depth this guy has. And so Ken Duke is another one I honestly believe is good for the sport. Whether he's agreeing in the moment or disagreeing in the moment, I adore him. I really, really do. He is also probably under the mentorship a little bit. I like hearing what he has to say from his experience.
Carries a lot of weight with everybody that is in the know, that's in the upper level of the business. When he speaks, everybody listens usually.
Yeah, and he how can I say this? He knows what works. Even, you may go out on a limb and try something. He can almost see the outcome of something that you've tried. Now, that doesn't mean it may not work for, it may work for you, it may not work for you, but he can almost tell you about the story you're about to go into. Yeah. And that's kind of the cool thing. He is about you developing as an individual, developing as a man, developing as an angler. He's all about that. But he is good. He is so good for the sport, and he's helped this sport tremendously. And again, probably more of a quiet soul about that, but there's a lot of things that he's done that honestly, that the sport wouldn't be where it is. Another one of my heroes is Tommy Sanders. He kind of, to me, comes from TV land into bass fishing and then says, okay, let's make this work. And he has a resume of effort that has shown itself. And the guy is probably one of the most humble individuals you can run into. Super kind gentleman. Again, definitely one of my heroes for sure. I don't know how many people know this guy, but James Overstreet. James is a photographer for Bassmaster. When I say photographer, I don't put that lightly. I mean, that guy, yeah. he can shoot an elk 1,000 miles away and make it look like it was dancing in Disneyland. I mean, the guy he's just great. So he not only has an eye for for camera work. I fake my camera work, and sometimes it actually shows.
Well, he's also got a knack when he's on the water catching those really special moments.
Yes.
I mean, they do put him in the right place to get those moments, but he's got the ability to get it just right that in that moment the emotion, everything that happened in that, without reading the story or the caption underneath the photo, you already know what happened there.
Well, it's kind of like you go to an auditorium and you watch a boxing match or an MMA match or jiu-jitsu or whatever, wrestling, whatever, and you watch, and if you turn away for a half a second, you may have missed the critical move, the position of one of those athletes, right? And it's so strategic, right? So everything that they do, hand on ground, hand on wrist, whatever, is all strategic. So there's all these multiple pieces of strategy going on. Where James shines is he hits the camera, pulls the trigger, and he's able to capture that thing that maybe you and I would have missed just by reaching down and grabbing our popcorn. And that's
it's almost like he knows it's coming before it happens sometimes.
Yeah.
It's amazing some of the shots he's gotten over the years.
Yeah, I have a kind of a funny, I shared it with him not too long ago. He probably just thought I was weird and ridiculous, but I was at the Bassmaster Classic and I had to get down to the dock to see Aaron, to see him off. We had a camera boat ready to go. When I got to the area, there was something around 6,000 or 7,000 people at the blast off in layers, meaning down the hill in layers. And I pulled in and somebody told me, you'll be here at such and such time. You'll be able to get through. Well, I got there and there was already people there. So I'm stressing. So I'm driving around trying to find a parking spot. No parking spot. I have to drive 1.5 miles away, park my vehicle, carry my camera and my gear, and run for 1.5 miles back. And once I got there, then I couldn't even see where the boats were launching from. That's how many people were there. So I didn't even know where Aaron was, and so I needed to get down to the boat that I was going to be in, the camera boat I was going to be in. And I was just overwhelmed. I was like, man, I don't even know where to go. Is it over there, 1/4 mile? Is it over there, 1/4 mile? And here comes James, and I'm like, James, I don't know how to get down there. And he just looks at me like, you poor soul, just follow me. Well, he flips that camera up. That camera looks like a bazooka, and the lane clears. I mean, people just like swoop and moved out of the way, and I'm just kind of hanging on his shirt tail, and he's dragging me down the stairs, and I got there. But what I'm getting at is he had done this 1,000 times. This scenario that I was overwhelmed, and he had done it 1,000 times. He knew exactly what to do. Boom, it was in place. I got to my boat, and it made the day. Probably if he wasn't there, I would have fumbled trying to find an avenue to get down there. May even miss my boat, but he he just shook his head like, get behind me, grab the shirt, go, let's go. I'll get you there. But again, he's one of my heroes in the aspects that he's promoted this sport. Every time he takes a picture, every single time he takes a picture of bass fishing, it's promoting the sport. It's making the sport viable. It's making the sport available to me and you. It's making the sport available to us as tournament anglers. It's making the sport available to us as people in the industry. He captures that, and he does such a great. And there's other camera guys that do a great job too. But I'm saying I think James is probably one of the most fluid and most intelligent cameramen that I've run across. Not that I'm experiencing in any way or form. So definitely I would say that he's one. And then I probably the last guy, he's a fisherman, would be Larry Nixon. I would say Larry Nixon. And here's the reason I would say Larry Nixon. I kind of grew up watching Larry. Larry was, at least on camera, was the most humble guy I had ever met. So what I'm getting at is get past all the egos and the heavy competition. All that stuff existed. Larry, Larry, he was the #1 moneymaker in bass fishing. He was the first one to hit $1 million. And back then, that was when you won a Bassmaster tournament, an invitational for $20.
Yeah.
Right. It was like, it wasn't $100,000 back then.
Yeah.
So here's a guy that hit 1 million before everybody else did.
The hard way.
The hard way.
Yeah.
Finding fish. That guy was finding fish on his own the hard way. There was no circle of love and GPS spots being handed out to guys and high-fiving thereafter. This guy found spots that...
There wasn't GPSs back when he was doing this.
Exactly.
I mean, to be honest, there was Lorancy.
Yeah.
That wasn't on a bass boat.
Yeah.
It's not a bass boat electronic at all.
Yeah. I probably, if we go back to old footage, Larry had one of those bait casters with some type of hard line or braid or dacron on it, and then it had a big old weight on the end of it, right? And so he could control the bottom and find out whether or not it's shell or clay or whatnot. But Larry was a phenomenal angler. And here's the cool piece. I was coming up in the sport and desperately wanting to learn how to catch fish. And I came across some of his media and stuff, and I watched it 1,000 times. I just learned so much from him. If he had never put that stuff out there, I probably wouldn't have been able to do what I do today as an angler. He allowed my mind to open up and think about how fish move and migrate, and then go practice that on my own body of water. I know Larry well now. I mean, we've known each other for many, many years. You know, he's actually healing up from a shoulder injury, so hopefully he'll be fishing again. But it's kind of like you talk to some of the college kids and you're like, yeah, do you know who that guy is? And they're like, no. And I'm like, you don't know who that guy is? That's a legend.
That's one of your forefathers in the sport. You should understand where he came from.
And really so, and there's some guys that do, so don't get me wrong. But when I come across that with a young buck of some sort, I literally say to him, you need to go look that name up and come back to me.
I mean, he won a tournament on St. Clair, Carolina rigging a lizard.
Yeah.
No one does that still to this day.
Yeah.
I've been wanting to try to pull it off and recreate some semblance of that moment, you know, out there. Yeah. But it's like, I don't Carolina rig. I live up north. We just don't do that stuff. I have to really force myself to do that and take tubes and drop shots out of the boat. I'm going to have to one day.
Well, the other thing, you know, Larry's been all over the world and fished as well. And he doesn't even, you know, he humbly just doesn't even talk about it. But there was a clip, a movie that was done in Japan years ago. And I don't know, he'd probably laugh if I regurgitate this. And I can't remember the name of it. But it's had something called like The King of Fishing. And I can't remember the Japanese host, but that Japanese guy had Larry in the boat. And it was almost unfair. The Japanese host was like, okay, we're on the lake now, go find him. And I'm like, holy smokes, you go try to find him. you know, and it was really kind of interesting. And Larry calmly broke apart that lake that day.
Yeah.
Holy smokes.
I mean, if you look at Larry, Roland Martin, Al Linder, you know, that era of angler, what they could do with just what they're feeling on the end of the rod is a skill set that the new anglers now just do not have.
Yeah.
It's awesome watching it. It really is.
Yeah, those guys would find topography with lures. They would use lures to catch fish. I mean, they you know, again, I think they were forced a lot because they're originators. They're the originators of finding fish, some of these guys. And Larry Nixon for sure. And so Larry Nixon would get on a new body of water and break it down, dude. There wasn't any, oh, well, we're going to go look at our Lowrance map or whatever and see, you know, the rise and the high points. This guy was breaking this stuff down. But if they gave out $100,000 tournaments back when he was winning, you know, his money winnings would be 20-fold, right? You know, so so that again speaks to how good that guy is. But again, he's super humble, gracious, another real wise man, real intelligent man. And I've always enjoyed talking to him. Yeah.
Well, since we're kind of talking about some of the greatest anglers in the business right now, not looking at Bass fans rankings,
Sure.
who do you think are legitimate the top 5 best bass anglers spring to winter?
Wow.
I'm not talking the guy that can go down to Okeechobee and slaughter
Right.
them. There's
Right.
those specialists.
Right.
But I'm talking pure fishermen year round. Put them on any body of water, they can be
Yeah.
dangerous. Who are those 5?
Yeah. Again, I apologize, Justin's fans, because I may not get this right. I would say in the top 5 would be Aaron Martens, Kevin Van Dam, Brian Thrift, and then it kind of gets a little bit harder for me. Those definitely would be the 3. Man, I don't,
Is Scott Martin in that top 5 conversation for you? Since he's kind of the poster boy of what FLW's top elite guys were before the
no,
switch up.
I don't know Scott. I have never talked with Scott before, and I have watched him on competitions. He's definitely a solid. He's definitely a solid angler for sure.
What about Jordan Lee? I mean, he's been dubbed the next Kevin if they're ever like kind of he's kind of like the nice version of LeBron in the fishing world. I think when you're comparing him to Kevin,
Jordan,
I think he's got his upside can be so big. I think in the long run.
yeah, I haven't figured him out yet. And what I'm getting at is, we've got this unprecedented success that he's had in such a short, compressed time. When you get that, sometimes you'll see a pro do really well in a tournament. So let's say he almost wins it or he wins it, and then the next tournament, the next one, he's just boom, he's on it again, and all of a sudden you're like, man, that guy's on a winning streak. Well, he may be on a winning streak because of the compressed seasonal time frame. So let's say there's 3 tournaments in spring. So this guy's just been whacking him on the same style. And I'm not saying that's always the case by any means. But so sometimes you'll see a string of successes that happen. His was a year apart, right?
Yeah.
A classic win and a classic win. So
and he wasn't having a bad season on the Elite Series both those years. He was in the mix for most of the year.
Yeah. Yeah, I would say I don't know if he's in my top 5, but I definitely think people better watch out, because that guy, if he shows up 2 more times like he has done in the past, there won't be much of an argument, will there?
No, I mean his record would show that.
Yeah,
yeah, he's there.
And I'm looking at these anglers. I picked these top 3. Kevin Van Dam, by statistics alone, is the most decorated on paper, right?
Yeah.
I would definitely say, Jacob Wheeler, maybe.
I tell you what, when you go back and look at Wheeler's early years, that back to back from the co-angler to doing the was it the American? Oh, the FLW. He won the co-angler, then he won the pro side the very next year. Yeah. That is a feat in itself, to be in the back of the boat and win it, because it's not easy, and then win it from the front of the boat the next year, and then make the jump to bass, and now he's one of those pinnacle level guys. I would probably say he's definitely in the top 20 right now. I think on Bass Fan he's up there a little bit too, because the average finishes and stuff. As of late, he's got a hot hand right now.
Yeah, he's a good angler. He's a good natural angler. Definitely aggressive enough. That top 5. I don't know if I can name as a top 5, but I would definitely say that he's there. There's some guys that have come and gone that we forget about. Whether you like them or not, we forget about them too. That had these streaks that were unprecedented.
And Reese had some phenomenal years. What, 4 or 5 years? He was right there with Kevin at every event. and then he won the classic, and then just kind of, I don't know what happened.
Yeah, you take like
is it his head? What is it? I don't know. What he can still catch fish. We know that.
David Dudley, like he was like
Yep.
FLW's #1 winner. I mean, or money winner for a while. I don't know if he still is, but
Timmy Hortons had a streak where he was dominant.
yeah.
He called for a pizza to eat dockside because he was done early. Like that's like the coolest baller move I would love to do in a tournament. Catch him by 9, 10 o'clock, go back to dock and just sit there and wait and eat a pizza and have it delivered. That was one of the coolest moments of the tournament. But what was he gonna do? I mean, he didn't want to break down. He just had to be at the dock and he won. So
look at Andy Morgan. Andy Morgan had an amazing.
I tell you what, on the FLW side, I think he could creep into that top 5.
Yeah.
The old guard from FLW, he was up there too. He's a hammer. He
right.
really is.
I will leave my last 2 positions for your followers and fans to fill. But I would definitely say Brian Thrift, Aaron Martens, and Kevin Van Dam would be in the top 5 for sure.
You want to know what is really interesting about Aaron? If he didn't run into Kevin at those years, where would he be?
Oh, you know
what I mean? Like it was like it was the best scenario, but also the worst scenario for him. Well, because it definitely pushed him to push harder. Well, at that time in his career, it really did.
So what people don't realize is that Kevin Van Dam had 10 years. That's almost 2 or 3 careers for some elite anglers. He had 10 years of fishing before Aaron even showed up. The amount of tournaments and the dominance that Aaron had out west for the Pro-Am side was unprecedented. There weren't people that were doing what he was doing back then. So here's a guy that was winning everything out west, and he came into. So if those guys started at the same time, I think you would have saw stats be different for sure. When Aaron left Bassmaster to go to MLF, his stats were the strongest out of all the elite anglers.
Yeah, super consistent.
Yeah, so the most consistency and the most dominance. So it's really hard to say, and if Aaron showed up to play and Kevin wasn't there, but you just have to give Kevin on paper is the most dominant, most successful angler, and I go back to Rick Clunn. We forget about that. I mean, how dominant was Rick Clunn?
He's still fishing. I mean, he just won. Was it a year or 2 ago down in Florida?
Yeah,
throwing a chatterbait.
Yeah,
I mean that was impressive for somebody that disappeared for a while. Then boom, I just won one. See, I still know how to do it, kids.
Yeah,
that's exactly what it was.
It's so funny. You're like, oh, did Rick retire? I haven't heard about him. He must have opened.
Boom, here's a win. Thank you.
Win. Like he wins one. And so I don't think we as deep thinkers really give him enough credit. He was one of the most dominant anglers as well. David Fritz, I've spoken with David a number of times. He's a solid angler too. He went on a streak that was unbelievable, and probably if he didn't open up his mouth, I'm joking, but if he didn't open up his mouth and talk about deep crankbaits, he probably would have won another 8 of them.
Yeah. I think you have to put Clunn in that top 5 just because of
who?
Rick.
Oh, Clunn, yeah.
You have to put him in that top 5, I think.
Yeah.
Just because of the eras that he crossed.
Yeah.
And he performed very well and consistent.
Yeah.
Granted, in the modern tech era, he's definitely had a little bit harder time catching up and keeping up with it.
Mm-hmm.
But he can still catch the hell out of it.
Oh fish. Yeah. I mean, as long as Rick's skull is working and he's pretty happy doing what he's doing, he'll probably win another one. It's just a reminder how good he really, really is.
Yeah.
And like I don't put it past any of these guys. What we don't really take into consideration is not only have these guys won, they were developers of the sport. The guys that are in the sport now, I don't think are developers of the sport. They're not like taking the sport to a new level because they've innovated the sport.
I mean, those guys were designing the baits that we use to this day.
Yeah.
Creature baits, Tommy Biffle and those guys and jig fishing where it's at because of Denny Brower and guys like
Yeah.
him. I mean, when I was a teenager, Denny Brower was like one of my idols. Like I picked up a skirted jig because of him.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
You know, that was the only reason why I picked one up and started fishing with it. I said that to somebody not too long ago.
Well,
And they're like, "Oh yeah, we forgot about him."
there's these guys that people, yeah, they. What was
Sight fishing, Guido Hinton and his son.
you know?
Those guys, the sight that they were the sight fishing masters.
Yeah.
You know, for a long time.
Well, you're absolutely right. You think about what guys know about sight fishing now. Those guys knew, in bundles back then. The only reason we know is because those guys were gracious enough to share it with us. That's how we know.
In Bassmaster magazine of
Yeah, or I'm talking about like the invitationals when you did draw and draw. I mean, forget that. Those pros, you came in and all of a sudden you're drawing Shaw in Florida.
I miss those days. I miss those days where you get some random podunk weekend warrior on the back of the boat and see how they deal with it. Some of them were cool with it, other ones that hated it.
No. There was it was called the Bassmaster Invitationals and Bassmaster Opens.
Yeah.
But they had pro on pro in those events. And so every once in a while you'd be like, oh no, and Aaron Martens are fishing against each other, or whatever it would have been. I don't know if I can recall one. But you would be like, oh shoot, these two guys are fishing together. And those guys got along great. But what I'm getting at is whatever Skeet knew, then his cohort would know too, right? Because they drew each other. So if Skeet's a really good jig fisherman, his cohort got to see it firsthand. If his cohort is a really good spinnerbait fisherman, then Skeet got to experience it. So it was the pros took care of themselves in that way, but they brought their own talents to the podium, man. And so it was a really, really interesting era for sure. So many good guys, so many good anglers, though. I mean, really, Bernie Schultz, he showed a streak in there for many years where he just was really a strong suit. Todd Fairclough, people forget about him. He's kind of the quiet, consistent.
He's always you usually hear him in the mix at least once or twice a year at an event. Like he's in the mix all the way to the last day. He may not win it, but he's in that top 10, top 20 talk.
Yeah.
At least a couple events every year. And that's saying something too. But when he bombs well. So.
Oh, I don't know Todd personally. I met him maybe twice in my whole life. But he's a really, really kind person, really, really good guy. But gosh, man, there's some guys out there that and we forget about the undertone, the guys that are, getting into the top 20, every single tournament kind of guys, the last 5 years. We forget about those guys quite a bit. You know who's a really good angler right now? And I'm just going to tell you the fact that this guy's a good angler. I'm not holding anything back. This guy can catch him everywhere. And if he just keeps his head in the game and keeps working hard, he's going to show it. It's going to show again and again is Jamie Hartman. Jamie Hartman, I think, is he a New York boy? I can't remember. But anyways, I know Jamie, really, really good guy. Really good guy. We hit it off really well. I consider him a good friend of mine. But separate that. I'm impressed with that old dog can hunt, man. I mean, he can hunt. You'll see him win a tournament, and then it's quiet, and then all of a sudden he wins another one. Then it's quiet, and then he gets a second or a third. And then you realize, it's really sober, and you realize, man, he's had a powerful career. I mean, a powerful career. So he's not out of it by any means. And he took off a back issue, was it? Took off, came back and wins one.
Yeah. After
being gone, right? So that's an example. That's one guy for sure that definitely that's going to showcase himself. It's hard for me to come up with 5, but I'll leave the other 2 positions for the fans to come up with. Probably Rick Hunn. Rick Clunn would be in that position, one of the top 5.
Now let's change gears here because this is something I know you are very well versed in that many don't know. and we all know you know lures, you know rods, you know reels, line, all that good jazz. Let's talk about boats. You run one of the most unique boats out there for bass fishing. It's Allison.
Yep.
Crazy fast. I've seen one in person. Haven't got a chance to ride one yet because I had to stay in the store and work. Couldn't skip out for a 20-minute boat ride because we're kind of busy. It was a weekend. But they're a cool boat. But an Allison is up there in the price point range for the average bass guy.
Yeah.
And that's saying something when there's Rangers that go for six figures when they're all decked out.
Right.
I'm not sure what Allison decked out with power pulls and two 12-inch graphs at front and back, what it's going to be with Panoptics and whatever it is.
Sure.
But out of like, I'm going to give you 5 major boat brands. Give me the pros and the cons, if you know them, firsthand, of those boats. Feel free to just roast them if you want, because sometimes they need it to get going better.
Before you give me those, I want to tell folks a little bit. I never got an Allison for its speed. That was not on my. What I was so impressed with, like what was mind blowing to me, was the fuel efficiency. It was twice the fuel efficiency of some boats. So rigged, all tackle, live wells, full gas tank, rolling down. At the end of that tournament, I got twice the fuel economy. The other thing that really impressed me about that boat, that's an American company. Allison's an American company. It's been around for over 60 years as a company. There are innovations that Allison Boat Company contributed to the bass fishing industry, and we don't even give them credit for it. There's other big name brands that they make a cup holder and we give them credit, but Allison,
we don't do that.
No, it's like a car commercial, and we have 4 cup holders now.
We have 14, yeah.
Yeah, and 2 of them can be used for lures.
So for those who don't know, that is an Allison.
Yeah,
it has freaking headlights, man.
Headlights, and the thing is, those headlights actually adjust, and they're on a pressure switch. When you're running down the river in gray light conditions or nighttime, you can actually see out in front of you. It's like no joke. The degree of V in that hull is like almost 23 degrees. So
similar to like an offshore boat would have, actually.
Yeah. So you're talking about actually an excellent rough water boat. It's so funny, guys will say, "Oh, that's full of junk." There's no way that. And then I'll run. I fish the Columbia. You probably have seen some pictures of waves that I've been in literally 13-foot waves before. That's the wave faces.
I'm going to find my favorite picture of you riding waves. Just keep talking. I'm going to find it.
But I ran wave faces that were, anywhere from 4 foot to 12 foot. I don't recommend that for anybody. But what I'm trying to say is, in some cases, I've had a long ways to get home because the wind has blown up. On my system, the water runs from the east out to the west, but the wind comes from the west, and it can stack up waves really, really. And you're talking about 1 mile, 2 miles, no longer than 5 miles wide. The river system is. Plus, you got compressed current, which is flowing when the gates are all open. So an 18-mile-an-hour wind can turn that system into 4-foot waves. No problem. It's just guaranteed. In fact, some of the pros that have fished both, like Erie and St. Clair, and then have come and fished the Columbia River, have said the Columbia River is a shocking system. They'd never thought it was going to be that way. If I told you how many boats I've seen with the engines shearing off of them, the engines literally shearing off the boats, the holes of bass boats splitting where you can put your hand up into the hole of the bass boat, transoms inverting.
Yeah.
I've seen it all. So the
Aaron's actually snapped bolt on Erie coming back to St. Clair.
Yeah. So why would I run an Allison and that kind of stuff? Well, the Allisons are actually built kind of like in the airplane industry. They have unitized construction. The Allison family has been gracious enough to allow me to see bits and pieces of what they do. Their resins are actually behind locked door, man, and key. You can't get into their resins at all. This is the formulation that these guys have. But they came out with a center live well configuration. They came out with a front pedestal that you see on a right there. We were getting the whole polished, actually, which will make it more efficient. But they've come out with a whole bunch of different innovations that bass fishing has been using for many, many years. In fact, folks don't know, but Ranger approached Allison many, many years ago, and did this little collaboration on a whole. There's more information. There's more the Allison guys know about that stuff. What people don't also know is the world's most dominant offshore racer, Fountain Boats, right? Jerry Fountain.
Yep.
Borrowed the Allison pad and bottom of the boat, bottom of the hull. Borrowed that, put that on their offshore boats, and won hundreds of races. Became a multi-billion-dollar industry, or company, global company at one time. So the contributions that company has done is amazing, amazing. Some people like the style of boat, some people don't. I love the style of boat. It's one of the most agile, fast. And when I say fast, I'm not really talking about top end. It does do the top end, but
yeah, it's a screamer.
Well, the funny thing is, like the stroker guys who make the stroker makes a fast boat. They're now, they're funny. I see them get on. They'll be like, "Hey, my boat ran 111. Hey, my boat ran 112. What? That's a blazing fast. The fastest I've ever been in a bass boat was an Allison, 103. So I know my buddy's been in one that's 107. So the stroker guys are ripping. Some of these guys, of course, the layups and the horsepower and all that stuff. But I was talking to Darius about it one day, and I go, well, the stroker guys are, of course, I know nothing of what I'm talking about, but I go, the stroker guys are getting like 111 miles an hour, running down the canal in Florida. And he said to me, yeah, that's pretty good. And he goes, yeah, we got an XTB 21 to run 134 one time. And I was like, holy
that's fast.
So, again, Allison.
There's no brakes on a boat. That's all I'm going to say.
Parachute. Allison holds all the speed records, or there's a long distance record they don't hold, but they hold all the speed records for bass boats. And people say this all the time. Well, you can make any boat go fast, right? But all these boats that have gone fast, they used to do this show out, like Mercury or Bassmaster used to have all these boats show up in one place, and they
actually raced them in that.
They raced
as part of the tournament. I vaguely remember something about that.
Yeah, and show them off and that kind of stuff. And then there would be the boat races, the sanctioned boat time trap races. Basically, a boat would get up there and see if it can run fast both ways, up and back, and then they would take the average of that. So Allison would, basically own all those. So it's not that how do you dominate the world records? Every boat, you can make almost any boat go fast, right? Make it lighter, put a bigger engine on it. But how do you win a world record, right? So Allison holds thousands of records won. But in the bass boat category, the reason I got that boat was because of its ability to run and chop, because of its mid-range speed. Its storage was versatile, meaning it was bulk storaging. I could kind of configure my own storage. And then the fuel economy. And then also on the trolling motor, that thing was quick. I could rip through shallow water. I could get to position and could do all that stuff. That's where the boat shined for me. So it just became a powerful tool that I utilize, especially if I had a long trip. So with that being said, shoot those boat brands to me. Skeeter. I've ran a couple Skeeters, 21-foot Skeeter. I like them. I think they're a solid boat. They're a durable boat. Some people don't like the fact that they're a little bit bow high at resting position. It doesn't affect me much. I've seen Skeeter from the beginning of time to present day. I still think they're making a great product. They're not the fastest boat. They'll scream and talk about being this or that, and I guess everyone has their day and time. But an overall great fishing platform, I think so. There's been times when the boat hasn't done well, or they've had to do some gel coat change ups and stuff like that. But overall, I think if you've been with Skeeter for a long time, even through the ups and downs, Skeeter has been a pretty good boat company for the most part. Yeah.
Phoenix.
Phoenix. I like Phoenix personally. I've ran, not owned, but I ran driven for long periods of time. Their 700 series and their 900 series. Those boats run the 700. Actually, I think it's like 723. I think that boat runs the best. That's just my bias. As far as running, on pad and stuff like that, I think that boat runs the best. The 900 series is a generous platform. It's a big boat, big deck, plenty of room. But I've ran all those boats. They are similar to Stratus to me. I've ran a couple Stratuses, 209 Pros and stuff. If I look at the bottom of the boat, there's a lot of identification between Stratus and Phoenix. At the bottom, all you got to do is take a picture of the hull and pad. That doesn't mean that they haven't worked hard on that boat. It just means that I know where they're kind of coming from, at least to some degree. I think that they're a good boat. I haven't owned one, but I put many hours into two of them. If I was to buy a boat, I definitely would look at a Phoenix, depending on what I was trying to do. But I actually like their 700 series better as a performer, meaning driving the boat. If I was driving the boat, fishing, you can argue you need more deck or you need less deck. The funny thing is, and I'll put this out there. The 723 was considered a generous fishing platform years ago. There was nobody that was complaining that I know of. Now there could have been, but there was no one that was complaining about that 700 series. That plenty of space, plenty of deck. Well, I took the measurements to the deck from what I call the station. So that's where you would stand to operate the trolling motor pedal and make cast. That's going to be your primary area. So I call that the station. In that was the exact same width as an Allison XB21.
That's a wide boat.
So the 723 and the Allison XB21 are actually basically the same at the station. But I take it a little bit further. Guys talk about deck space all the time, but isn't it funny if you watch? I sit with pros sometimes and let them fish, and I count how many times they cast in a day and how they position lures because I'm doing lure development stuff. But I look down, and on their right foot, there's 5 rods, and on their left foot, there's 6 or 5 rods. And I measure. Their foot placement is only 2 or 3 inches from those rods.
Yep.
Right? So you start thinking about this thing called deck space. So, the deck space that's vacant is usually the deck space that's actually behind the station, behind the angler. A lot of these boats are about the same once you start dropping rods down on them, as far as the foot space goes. So storage probably becomes an important quest for tournament anglers. So I would say the 900 series and the Phoenix would probably hold true in that regard.
The times that I've driven a Phoenix, and I've driven 2 different ones, they were nice riding boats.
Mm-hmm.
For St. Clair roughness, there was one day it was pretty rough, and it was very comfortable to drive at a pretty good clip and don't feel like you're gonna spear a wave or get in any bad situations. So I like them. Yeah. They're definitely up there in the price point category in boats now because all the extra features they're doing and stuff. The next one is I'm going to put it as more of the weekend angler price point, and that's the Nitro.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so the Nitro,
even though I think glass boats are overpriced, give me aluminum all day long, but I'm a glutton for punishment.
Yeah. so here's what I'll say. The Nitro probably has one of the nicest fishing layouts on the market. It's actually a very simplistic, very easy, very friendly fishing layout.
Yep. Storage,
etc. They've taken the deck of that boat and they've made it generous. So I think in that regard, if you're a weekend angler and you're not going to be, really going balls to the wall in rough situations all the time, probably I would say, the Nitro may be the better boat for you. Price wise, gosh, you can't beat them, right? I mean, price wise, they gosh,
They're very attractive
yeah,
for the
yeah.
pricing.
So in that regard, performance side of things, I've been in Nitros, driven them, 21-foot, 20-foot boats. They drive okay, in my opinion. But I am most attracted to their fishing layout by far. I think they have a really, really good fishing layout.
Yeah. Solid deck layout in the Nitro. Yeah,
They could use more storage. Their rear storage could be bigger, that kind of thing. And it probably depends on models. So, I haven't been in every 2020 model or 2019 model lately, but I would say generally speaking, they were friendly as a fishing platform.
I know when I was shopping for my boat, I was looking at some Nitros, but I wanted to be able to trailer the boat on a single axle just because of my home situation, getting in and out of the driveway, being able to turn a little sharper with it. And the ride quality in those 18-foot Nitros versus the 198 Ranger aluminum, they were actually the same.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's interesting when you think about the total, the disconnect with aluminum boats for the glass guys. Oh, they ride rough, they're gonna beat you up because it's aluminum.
Right.
Well, they're foam filling these things. They're just as dense when they hit the water as the glass boats now.
The key
It's
to
a lot closer than it used to be.
the key to the hulls ride has nothing to do with freeboard, like some guys will say. Freeboard is it? Well, the freeboard is only the vertical stand on the side of the boat that allows how much water goes where. It doesn't depart the water. The key to the rough water ride is the bow and keel, actually, the length of the keel. On some many standard bass boats, that keel is not even 10 or 12 feet long. So the longer your keel is, where your keel doesn't break off and not become a keel anymore, the longer your keel is, the more you have the ability for the boat to start to bridge and cut the wave, for example, these 2-foot chops. And then the shape, the inversion, the angle of that pad or back of the boat is very, very important, because that's what's going to distribute water as you're driving. And the more aggressive that is, as when you start getting into speed, the better it is. I can tell you, I've been in a number of bass boats driving only 60 miles an hour on a 1.5-foot chop, and I felt like I was going to pee blood, because what would happen is you would get the pounding. It would be boom, 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 boom.
Sounds
boom,
like
boom.
St. Clair every day.
And the seats would have 8 inches of foam, but it didn't really matter because you would go right to the board.
Yeah.
So the problem with that is that the V is much flatter, if I can say that. The more sharp the V is, the more of a smooth ride, the more cut you're going to have in the boat. That's just basic engineering.
Now, the benchmark for years, and a lot of this was definitely customer service of, the Heritage Ranger. Solid boat, I'll admit that. But Ranger's been an interesting one the last 3-4 years.
Yeah, there's going to be a lot of loyalists to Ranger. They were born, raised, eating Ranger. I have respect for that. I've owned 21-foot Ranger, driven several of them. So I have a good idea how they run. I'm not excited about them in rough chop, but I argue this point. They're probably, in my opinion, the best jig boat, I call them, around. I think how they sit in the water and how I can point at buck bushes or whatever and pitch jigs or skip jigs at docks. The Ranger has that appeal to me, to sit stationary and make that happen. In my Allison, I move a little bit more. I get more bow swing. I just have to correct it and know about it, and I'm fine. But the Ranger actually sits a little bit deeper and flatter and moves less. So the bow swing, for example, is less apparent in that boat. Once it gets swinging, though, it's hard to really get it back. A lot of boat gets moving. So fishing platform that way, I would give some marks to Ranger for. Drive ability, you know, they do what they're supposed to do. In my opinion, I mean, I think they weren't designed necessarily to be the best rough water boat. Other words, you would see their V's would be much more aggressive. But there's a lot of guys that like them, and you know, you go with that. There was a time when you couldn't say anything
bad
about
Ranger ever.
If you did, you got shot, you know, on your property. I'm joking. I have no problem. If I have a bad experience with a boat, I would bring that to the manufacturer and explain that. If somebody asks me my honest opinion about that boat, I'm going to try to do that. But I mean, all these boats that you've mentioned have good things to offer. You know, it's kind of how you put them in a situation, and when you load them, when you actually load them with, you know, 100 pounds of camera gear, a 260-pound male, a 230-pound male, or 200 male, you know, you're already, you know, around 600 pounds in flesh, and then you got a full gas tank. All these things start to change a boat, how a boat behaves. And then once you get the boat on plane and it starts running, you start seeing things. But fishability is really, really important. I think bass boat being agile. I fish big water, so I want an agile boat, period. I've got to be able to turn in a trough, climb the face of the wave, maybe have to turn again and climb another face of the wave. I may have to tack. So I want a boat that wants to climb the face of the wave and get to where it goes as easy as possible. So I'm game about that personally.
You have some pretty cool shots of you doing that in the Allison in some pretty bad conditions, honestly.
Yeah. I mean,
scary stuff. So
it is, and again, I've been in some rough stuff in big skeeters. Legend. I've been in rough stuff with the Legend. Legend, I think, was they did a really good job marketing. Dean Smith and those guys, they did a really good job marketing. They had, I think, their best boat was their 211 Alpha. That was a pretty nimble boat, and it actually rode well in rough water. My understanding was there may be some durability issues, but I never saw that. I rode
either. I seen a lot of them come through the shop, and the guys that were buying Legends were guys that left Ranger because they were having too many, you know, gel coat issues or just, you know, those annoying things that happen on glass boats. They were becoming too common, and they wanted to go somewhere else, but also get that more custom feel to their boat. And Legends really fit that bill for a lot of guys.
Yeah, you know, I think Legend did a very good Rangeristic approach to their boat. But they had a boat that could handle rough chop. I mean, engineering wise, was able to bridge the waves and do those type of things. And actually, the boat was fairly nimble in rough water. And I've put boats through some really, really nasty stuff. You know, not 5 miles, but 25 miles or 60 miles. So I can appreciate when a boat keeps its pace and it gets me home safe for sure.
So I got one more, and then I have one more big question that we need to cover, and we only got about 45 minutes after this next boat to get that done before my time limit for recording comes up. Vexus, newcomer, got some good guys at the helm.
Yeah. The Vexus, what I want to do with the Vexus is probably actually run it through its paces. That's going to tell me a lot. I looked at the bottom of the boat. I didn't see things that were like so mind blowing. And where I spend my time is at the bottom of the boat. That's going to tell me so much about the boat. It really is. How the boat handles, those type of things. Now there's fulcrum points and there's flotation and buoyancy and some other things that really do play into the boat's attitude when it runs. The attractive side to the Vexus, I'm not personally Google-eyed about it, but I don't know if I can be fair in that assessment because I just haven't spent any time in it. I think there's a lot of guys that got on the Vexus wagon and have and love it. I think there's a couple guys that I've talked to that own Vexus that are like, man, I love my Vexus.
Yep.
But for me, I would be, I get in the Vexus, I would weigh it at trailer, I'd weigh it at the scales, I'd fill it up and put it into tournament load, and then I would run it in some stuff. I can tell right away how good a haul is when it runs in 2-foot chop in on the Columbia River. I can tell instantly, especially after I go 60 miles, 30 miles up, 30 miles back. It tells me instantly how good that boat is.
For me, looking at on the aluminum side of things,
Yeah.
what they did with the actual beam of the hull or the keel part of the hull, and I gotta go over to the west side of the state and actually ride in one to experience it. But from what I'm hearing, it rides very similar to a few glass boats that we've talked about. Just because they have that little bit flatter, they don't have that more pronounced V that you're talking about earlier. But to get that out of aluminum hull, if that's true, I think that will be my next boat because I'm gonna stick to the aluminum side because I like to put in gravel ramps and do the stupid stuff that you don't put a glass boat through. So.
Yeah, I think aluminum. I think the aluminum side of boat construction has probably the greatest potential because you can do more with aluminum than you used to be able to do with. I think that engineering-wise, guys have figured out, hey, listen, if I make the aluminum cut the water this way or that way, I can make it a nicer ride. And so there are more and more aluminum boats that are becoming nicer rides. Back in the day, there was no argument. Yeah. If you were an aluminum boat on 2-foot chap, no, it didn't matter if it was 19 foot. It made you feel like you wanted to go to Hell Express because it just could not absorb the energy. And then you got into flotation issues and things like that. But now, Vexus, I have not seen that boat in particular. I think I may have saw it at the Bassmaster Classic, but I didn't go over and walk through them. I think they're going to take it seriously. I think they're going to take their aluminum line seriously. But there's other companies too. One of my friends, Mandel Pettis, he fishes. He was a co-angler, pretty dominant co-angler out of New York. He just got with a aluminum. And I don't know if it was Sea Arc or somebody, but he's raving about how impressed he is with their aluminum line. So it's in there and it's out there, and I don't doubt that some of these companies aren't going to put together boats that, gosh, what am I getting at? We'd run the 360 V Ranger fiberglass boats that these aluminum boats now can outperform those boats, right? So
well, if you look at the price point and the average weekend guy, a 150 motor is cheaper to take care of than a 250. It's easier to just get around in, and you're not crazy fast where it's dangerous for somebody that doesn't have a ton of steering wheel time going 70 miles an hour. It keeps it in that 50 to 60 mile range, which is honestly way safer than at 70. At 70, the margin of error is really small. And in recent years, you've seen that where guys have gone up on banks because they've hit logs, or they've came off a chop wrong and it tossed the boat. You're seeing more and more of that because you get these higher performance boats for guys that don't have the time on the water to be driving at that speed, but they think because hey, they do it in Bassmaster, we can do it too.
Yeah,
which honestly, is scary to me.
Yeah, I honestly think the owner, should still self-discipline. I'd hate for state and regulatory things to come in and beat bass anglers over the head about speed and performance. For the most part, we've policed ourselves very, very well as an entity. I would love to see, if you're going to be a professional angler, I'd love for you to have to go through a competency test of some sort. If you're going to fish pro, because you have somebody else's life in your hand. Yep. And I will tell you of an incident, a guy that owned a Ranger, and he was trying to make the Ranger run on wave faces that were too much for this boat, and he was hitting sponson to sponson, and that articulation almost ejected me out of the boat many times. And finally, you know, I kind of put my hand up and said I give, and we had exchanges of words. One was, listen, my life is in your hands. I'm not afraid of rough water. I've been in rough water probably 7 times bigger than what you faced. But I'm not afraid of rough water. But you have to be smart in that kind of stuff, because once poop happens in rough water, you've only got seconds to make decisions. I have certain tools that I use to cut nylon rope or anything. If I end up grabbing a rope while in an 8-foot wave, I've got certain things that I have in my boat to keep me strategizing and alive, because it doesn't matter if you have quote unquote upright flotation. I've seen boats do unique things whether they've had flotation in there or not, which is not happy. And so you just have seconds to take care of yourself. So that responsibility is huge. I ended up getting lacerated in that guy's boat, landing, coming down on his fiberglass because he pitched me. When I'm saying pitched, I was 3 feet above his seat in the air, and then came down on the midsection of his boat and actually sustained a laceration from it. And he doesn't realize that he's got some leverage because he's got a steering wheel in front of him, right? So he can actually leverage his weight, pull it forward, rest it, coming down, you know, all sorts of things. That steering wheel actually gives you quite a bit of leverage on impact. The co-angler or the passenger doesn't have that availability, especially on a single console. So yeah,
at times it's like riding a bull for longer than 9 seconds or 10 seconds, whatever it is.
Yeah. So
yeah,
you know, these machines are wonderful. They give us our freedom. I always say my freedom is on the river. If you can put me on water, I'm the freest. And so, but we do have to have some responsibilities. I'm not taking away any. If a guy wants to run 115 miles an hour, do it, but do it safely. I can tell you a real quick story. I took the safety tracks one time in a bass boat that I had, ran my links, and made sure there was no debris, and I was running my trap times, how fast this boat would run under a certain load with the gas in it and at the engine height. And I was taking all these notes down as I was doing this. And I hit ice that had flown down through the river system and came into this. But the funny thing was, the ice was not there when I ran my safety tracks. So I run to make sure there's no debris, right? And I run back and forth, and then I set up and I take my time. So I did my first trap, came down. I said, okay, well, shoot, I hit a good time. I'll try and see if I can get the boat balance a little more. I ran another trap, and the next thing you know, I'm running 80 miles an hour, and I hit ice that's 3 inches thick, and had 0 damage to my boat, 0 damage to my prop, 0 damage to my skag. But had that boat pitched me, no one was around to say, hello, are you okay?
And you're in water that you might have 20 minutes before you can sell it.
Exactly.
Before you can actually help yourself.
And if I would have got pitched into a hole in that ice, all sorts of things. I can swim, but listen, if the temperature drops below 80, I'm pretty much dead anyways. So, but what I'm getting at is, I'm a pretty safe guy. I ran the safety trap. I ran those and ran that length, and still something happened. And thank God, somebody was looking out for me that day, because I could have easily put that boat on its side on ice and pitched me. The velocity, the force, the centrifugal force could have just ejected me clean across the lake. So things can happen. They definitely can happen. I ended up safe, sound, flat, secure, and buckled my way out of there and went home. The funny thing is that day I didn't even tell my wife I was going out. It was kind of like a quick moment thing. Oh, I got to get this prop on. I got to go test this prop. I got to leave. I didn't even tell her where I was going. So she would have probably said, well, gosh, this weekend it's been really nice and quiet,
By Monday, where'd he go?
and then the coyotes having at me, later on. But anyway.
So this is the last thing for the night that we're going to talk about. So we're going to try to keep this to 30 minutes. The last time me and you had this conversation, I think it was about an hour and a half. We talked about this topic. So that was a long. I think it was like 2 a.m. in the morning, 3 a.m. in the morning here when we got done that night. That was a long night. That was a long night.
You guys, that's why we have this podcast.
So you have a very strong opinion on what's wrong with professional bass fishing and also how it can be fixed to be a true professional sport like other professional sports.
Yeah, I'm passionate, and I say the things that I say about the sport because I really do. I have an immense amount of love for professional anglers. They got to get their junk organized. They got to train. They got to do that. They got to, I fish every once in a while. I'll fish a pro event. What I have to do to get ready for that event takes me all day, all night for 3 days. These guys have got a system down because they're doing it all the time. They get it down. They get it efficient. They make it work. I'm running around like a confused child. So I have a huge amount of respect for these guys. First of all, that's first and foremost. Bass fishermen, tournament anglers, I do. I've been at different levels of that, so I say that. I do have I am passionate about the sport. That's the first part I should make clear. What I have to say is because I love the sport so much. I come from an athletic background. My athletic background was you train your tail off to try to run 100 meters under 11 seconds so that you can become, the winger or the striker to that team. You do these push-ups, pull-ups, sit-ups, whatever you got to do. You run for 90 minutes without throwing up anymore. And you train like this. And while you're training, there's no one around. You don't, all your buddies that go off and go party, you don't get to go do that. If you really want to become the best college football player or the best college soccer player or the best you can be as a professional athlete, you don't do that. You can't afford it. Maybe somebody does. I couldn't afford it. So that's where I come from. I come from an athletic background. Athletes who have dedicated their time to professional sports know exactly what I'm talking about, and probably deeper than the guy that just played on the weekend. So that's where I'm coming from. Our sport, I believe, could be more professionalized. And what I mean by that is if our pros get this thing called pro or professional, then they shouldn't have to be paying an entry fee at all, in my opinion. If you are a pro, somebody should be paying you, not you paying them. Now, again, we have some great leagues. I'm friends with many of the folks in these different leagues, and so I have a lot of love and compassion for that. And I know they built a business up, so I'm not hating on that business. My dream would be that if you qualify, Justin, from your state as a good tournament angler, and your goal was to fish professional, then whatever the qualifications were for you to get there, once you got there to this thing called pro, that every time you showed up at a tournament, you got paid. If it was $200 a tournament and you fished 6 tournaments, great, I don't care. If it was $2,000 a tournament and you fished 6 tournaments, I don't care. But you should be getting paid so that you can make a living, so that you can do it. There are a lot of amazing pros that do not fish right now because of this thing called money. So I've said this before. You've heard me say this on my soapbox. So what is the difference between a pro and a non-pro right now to this day? And I'm not talking about our subjectivity and our mentality about it, but what is the factual, legal, binding contract that qualifies you as a pro right now for fishing like the Costa events or the Opens? What is it? There's only one thing.
Your wallet.
It's to pay an entry fee. If you can pay the entry fee, now maybe you have to get in line with all the other guys that are wanting to pay the entry fee that day. But if you can pay the entry fee, you're a pro. So if my grandma has no legs, no arms, no head, and she pays the entry fee, it doesn't matter whether she catches a fish. Unfortunately, she is a pro, can compete in a pro tournament. I personally have some struggles with that. Again, it's not that money isn't going to good purposes. I wish that we would take a different route. And if you worked your tail off and it was time for you to make it into the pro side, you pulled your boat and trailer up and you competed in that tournament, you got paid. You know, I don't care about all the company endorsement stuff. You know, there's companies out there that are very, very well off. And so you can get the endorsement stuff on the side. But I'm talking about if you were a pro, you got paid. See, a professional.
You actually have a contract and somebody's paying you to show up and do a job, which is play a sport or participate in a sport. That's what a professional is. It's not, I have $1 million in my bank account, I'm going to go pay to play with these guys just because I can. Yeah, so
I used to joke about this. And again, my tournament buddies and stuff, you know, we razz each other about this. But I used to say this: how many professional boxers, guys that are professional boxers getting paid to box professionally, how many of them could become professional bass anglers? And some of my buddies would be like, well, I don't know, you know, maybe 1 or 2 of them, because no, every single one of them can. All they got to do is pay the entry fee. Now, how many professional bass anglers could become professional boxers? And that percentage just went to 0, maybe 1. Grant Goldbeck actually boxed, and he was a boxer at one time, so maybe he could do it. But
what about Ish Monroe?
I don't think Ish Monroe professionally boxed,
but he jumped the deck and
he somebody else's boat. But the outcome of boxing would be a little bit different. But what I'm getting at is, so 100% of the boxers could become professional bass anglers, but not 100% of the bass anglers could become professional boxers. There's something wrong with that. And if they did, the death rate would go up like 5,000%, right?
Yeah.
Because of that. Now, once you are a bass angler and you pay an entry fee, it's up to you to be as good as you can be. So if you could pay your entry fees and you work your tail off, you can become one of the best pros out there. That I'm not trying to stop anyone's game. I'm really not. But wouldn't it be nice that if every one of our pros that we look up to, that we see, would actually walk into that tournament and know that they're already paid for? I mean, it's paid for. You go and play the game that you can play, the best game that you can. You go try to win. Maybe Nike, maybe McDonald's, maybe Berkeley, whoever it is, gives you an endorsement on the side. I don't care about that. That's great. God bless you. But you're a professional. You should be paid. So this is, again, is only my opinion, only David's opinion only. I wish it was that way. I wish it was that way in a great way. With that being said, I think the organizations like FOW and Bassmaster, I think they do an amazing job. I think the concept has worked, so it's not an argument about that. I just personally wish that that our professional bass anglers could show up at the hotel, go to the field and compete and get paid. Again, this is only my opinion. So it may not be worth anything. There's a guy, Brian, I think he just passed me. What did he say? Take a look at the payout in professional golf. They just show up with a bag of clubs that someone else is. Yeah. So the
holes do move every day of a tournament. I will say that they do move. And the greens change. The rest of the course doesn't, but the greens do change because they move the holes. But other than that, you're spot on.
Hey, Brian, God bless you. God bless you. Hey, listen, and again, it's only my opinion. I'm not trying to hate on anybody. I wish for my brothers that could happen for them. I think the stress would go away. I've seen phenomenal anglers. I'm not joking. Anglers that could win the Bassmaster Classic no longer fishing anymore because they just couldn't afford it, or they got cut off this so-called team, truck team or lure team, and it's such a disappointment. When you talk to them in person, they're like, yeah, the reason why I'm not fishing right now is because I just can't afford to do it anymore. They're not good enough.
Yep, I got a buddy from Ohio that made the Elite Series and fished 3 events that first year because he had a limit. If I don't cash a check, I'm not going into debt further than this.
Yeah.
Those first 2 years, these guys are putting in 6-figure credit card debt every year just to travel and fish, and then they got to pay it off the rest of their life. If they don't make it, if they don't win a couple $100,000 checks.
Well, and if you take the complete winnings of the average professional angler, divide those winnings in the years that they fished as a professional, you start to go, whoa.
They've had great years, and most of the years they didn't make any money.
Yeah, but I mean, you then divide it, right? You divide this mass that they amassed this much amount of money, and it sounds really good up front, but then you divide it over the 10 years that they fished or the 20 years that they fished, and you're like, they only made that per month? I could have made that at McDonald's.
Yep.
Right. So again, this is only my opinion. only my opinion. I just would love to see tournament anglers, and we've got the AAA and the regional guys. Those guys are putting out their time. I used to compete in the federation, and there would be guys in my federation. We'd have 200 something anglers fishing, and we fish as individuals. You jump on the boat, we fish deck, face to face on one deck. You decide what boat you take. That was kind of the format. But we would actually have anglers that had a lot of money that would bring their motorhomes down to the lake and pre-fish for 2 weeks.
Yep.
Because they got it off and because they had a lot of money. And some of us were like getting off of work at 6:30 and driving an hour and a half to the tournament lake or river and fishing for 45 minutes, pre-fishing for 45 minutes because the sun's going down now.
Yep. And
then driving back, and I would take that 45 minutes of pre-fishing plus my maps, plus my skill set or not, and I would try to start to compose my tournament strategy. So, and again, I'm not sore at the guy that had the motorhome and could afford to do that, but that's a difference in resources, right? So it'd be nice to have the resources be equitable, have the guys going. But amateurs, what I'd like to see with amateurs is, sure, we could pay. As amateurs, we should pay, right? We're amateurs. We're going in and playing this game. We're going to pay. Okay, that's fine. But taking some of that money, maybe taking company investment money, taking sponsored money, endorsements, putting that in that pot, up in realm. I figure I hit some calculator numbers not too long ago, and it was amazing how much money could be generated at the amateur level for the pros, even that could be contributed to the pros. And some guys are going to say, well, why would we do that? Well, because you would be fishing for a slot as a professional. You'd be competing for that. So I would take a trophy if I finished number one in the federation. You don't need to give me my money back. I'm not there for the money anyways. I'm there to try to compete with myself, with the fish, and with the others. So the money part isn't what I'm focused on. But and if you didn't like that, you would compete in another league that paid out money. So it's not like I don't want to take away anything from somebody. But if there was a mass of anglers at an amateur level that thought, yeah, we want to be professionals, and out of 100 of those guys, you're going to take 20 of us, sure, we'll pay the entry fees or whatever we need to do to play that game. So anyways, again, if
you look at the amateurs, like what you're describing, if you look at football as an example, you have your college division, which the schools cover, which we kind of already have that happening now with bass fishing. But then you have your semi-pro where the guy has a job, plus he's playing still. So it'd be no different than, the Open Series or the BFLs. We already have that model in place that people are used to, but we're trying to bridge that gap from that to the true professional. And you have to do some restructuring to get there.
Yeah, right now we have to say, well, we'll set the circuit up for the weekend angler. We'll set the circuit up for the pros, so then they come in on Thursday, fish Thursday, Friday, Saturday. So we have these things that we're kind of bending to try to make happen. But that guy, unless he's filthy wealthy, and there's some, that guy has to go back to work Monday.
Yep.
And do it all over again. And he can do that for 20 years and have his pro card for 20 years. I was a professional for 20 years. I paid for my professionalism for 20 years. So I would like to see that change. Every guy that wants to play pro, that he should be paid as a pro. That would be, and if there, hey, listen, if there's any multi-million people out there, multi-million millionaires out there that would like to put together a pro league, let me know, and we'll sit down, we'll converse.
Yeah, we could go way deeper in this whole topic. Maybe we will one day. Maybe I'll have you on and we'll do nothing but break this down and point out how this can happen easily. Or not. You might want to keep that secret sauce for one day a millionaire comes and makes you a tournament director and you're a fat cat league commissioner,
Well,
getting booed on draft day.
Yeah, we're talking to some company heads. A couple of us were hitting some calculators, and I'm not saying it would be easy work to do, but it's a lot more achievable than people realize it. And I would love to see Bassmaster lead the way. If that was my dream, I'd love to see Bassmaster lead the way on that. But they're doing some of this of what I'm talking about in MLF, right? They're doing some of it in MLF, but again, MLF is 2 years old with this some of it kind of thing in place. What I'm talking about is the whole world, bass angling world changing in that direction, and big companies would get on board. I mean, they would. Tackle companies, if tackle companies only had to pay out what we would call a bond to be represented in that league, instead of endorsing a whole bunch of anglers.
Yep.
The money could go to that league, and again, some of that be divvied out for the professional salaries that are established. And if we could make that salary functional, where if you could make $20,000 a year fishing professionally, how many guys would do that? I know.
I mean, you could go find another $20K in a year to go make 40, 45, 50, $60,000.
I mean, how many guys
you can find a second job that can cover that?
If you go and you take your tournament expenses, I'm talking about truck, boat gas, hotel, and some guy will tell me, oh, well, I slept in my truck, when I was doing it. Okay.
Hey, I sleep in the back of my truck as a sales rep. So what does that tell you?
Yeah. I'm like, that ain't nothing new. I sleep in my truck when I go out and do my own stuff anyway.
Yeah. Saves a few bucks for some tackle.
Yeah.
Or that steak dinner when you're out.
Right. But if you look at these expenses, they're real, man. Hotel expenses at $100 a night for a week. Boat gas that you pay $100 to fill up every single time. Maybe it's less now.
It still sucks. But yeah, it's better.
License, the lure of the flavor of lure of the day on that lake, right? You're going to dump $200 in that. I need to have purple jigs because this is what the fish bite. You start looking at this and you start putting it together, and you're like, wow, to do one tournament, one open or one Costa tournament, if I was to do it semi right, it's going to cost me $3,000.
Yeah. Well, I know when I did the Bassmaster North Open on St. Clair, I had my entry fee. I had my gas money for the guy I was pre-fishing with that I gave him money. I also gave him some spy baits, trying to get him to use them, but he was being hard-headed. Andrew, you know who you are.
Andrew!
One day I will get you off that jerkbait bite and on a spy bait. We just got to slow you down a little bit. His nickname is St. Clair Squirrel for a reason. You just can't slow down. But and then I had the two boaters I owed gas money to. It's just because I understand how much it costs to run a boat. Yeah. I was pushing between my tackle buildup. I wanted new line in all my stuff. I was pushing $1,000 sitting in the back of the boat for a tournament that I live at. Yeah,
exactly. Traveling.
And I'm not traveling other than from my house to the ramp, and that's a 10-minute drive. Yeah. That I don't even count gas for this event. but I was pushing $1,000 to be in the back seat of a boat with zero control of where we go for 2 days,
Right.
but spending a whole week fishing because I couldn't be in the store because I could be talking to non-anglers and getting information because of the way the rules are. So I literally had to take time off from work to go fish this tournament. Guess what? That's more loss for me.
Yeah.
On the off side of this too, just because of the industry I was in. But it's amazing how fast it adds up. If you sat down and actually put line item by line item, on a spreadsheet and looked at it, it's crazy expensive to travel and do what these guys are doing.
Boat gas alone for me to fish my last Pro-Am was unprecedented because I wasn't going to not pre-fish, right? So I put a lot of time in to do that and didn't get any of that back, obviously. So you're always, when you get to your expenses, you start looking at that. Now, of course, if you got an LLC or something going on, you can write off some of this stuff, but still, those expenditures are significant and compared to what your income would be. With that being said, too, I part of this is it would be awesome to see big companies come forth. It'd be nice to see a company like Chevron come forth and say, okay, we're going to sponsor the league. That means all your boat gas is paid for and all your travel gas is paid for. Here's your Chevron card.
Yeah, here's a gas card. Go fill up.
And for that, we get a certain amount of airtime or whatever it would be, that they do contract in that. And then another company would maybe do, hotels. Maybe everyone does, Best Western. Again, I'm being a little bit facetious. Yeah. These hotels are strategically placed along the tournament beds, and so then now guys can park and get a good rest sleep. If you've ever slept in the back of your truck, and then you've ever slept on the ground for a tournament, and then you go into a hotel, take a shower, and sleep in a bed, there's a difference. And the guys that can afford to do the hotel are smart guys, and
the guys that can rent the house,
they can rent the house,
are way more rested because it feels more like at home. They're a little more at ease.
Yeah, exactly. So, and again, I'm not harping because I do a lot out of the back of my truck, a lot. But companies, I'm laying some of this responsibility on companies. I think companies could really change the sport by saying, okay, we're going to allocate advertising dollars, basically. A portion of those dollars would be to paid anglers at this professional level, and a portion would be paid to the league or Bassmaster or whoever, because Bassmaster's running it. They figure out those numbers, and I don't think it's difficult. I don't think it's impossible to do. I should say that it may be difficult to do, but there's some companies out there that would jump on board for this. But like I said, I'm looking for the millionaire again. My heart goes out to every single tournament angler. I know what it's like to be out there on 5 cents and trying to make it happen. I know what it's like to win a tournament and then look at the check and go, holy smokes, man. 3/4 of that needs to go here instead. I know what it's like to be out there and travel all day and all night, finally get there and have to do some type of boat repair or trailer repair. Which makes you anxious about your event because now you don't have a trailer tire. You got to go get one or whatever these things that come up that cost us time and money. So I can appreciate those situations.
And if you don't have techs there at the event, which you don't at many of them, there's only a handful where you actually have like reps from Mercury, Yamaha that can say, hey, help me out. And they'll, if you're not a high level guy, you're still paying for your parts. But they're going to do the work for you, but you got to pay for it. But you're not paying full retail price, thank God, most of the time. Yeah. So they're there to help you, but the support needs to be better from these companies, and the only way to do that is by totally changing. How we do this.
Yeah, I mean, if a company knew, hey, listen, we got $1.5 million we can put to this, and out of that, we're going to get this many hours or this much show or this much space or this much time in our company, it's worth it. You pay for advertising on TV, you find out how expensive it is really, really quick. So if you're paying for something that you love, like let's just say you're Chevron and you love bass fishing, it makes it worthwhile. You could make a huge impact. The sport could grow, I think, even more, in my opinion. And again, I don't have all those answers, and this is a passionate answer that I'm giving you. I just feel like our tournament anglers work really, really hard and they have to do quite a bit. Our pros have to do quite a bit, and sometimes the resources aren't there that they deserve, and that's disheartening.
Well,
Yeah,
and
there's some anglers out there that you're just like shaking your head, like really, but I mean, in the most part, what I'm saying is
well,
that I'd like to see that happen.
and another thought I kind of had while we're talking, but also thinking back the last time we had a conversation on the phone about this, is that you could, in theory, teach younger anglers how to be a professional.
Yeah,
That's the other side of this, because if you go through, as like a baseball or a football player, you have different levels and expectations of how you're supposed to act, how you're supposed to dress. They teach professionalism along with teaching the sport,
yeah.
and some of that could definitely creep in. I mean, honestly, hockey players probably are the most professional looking players walking into a locker room out of every sport.
Mm-hmm.
Like, because coaches require at least a shirt and a tie and nice pants. You're required to travel that way.
Mm-hmm.
So, and the whole team looks that way. So you still have that team unity because you're dressed a certain way, but you're also there to do a job. You're
Yeah.
there to be responsible. You're there to be professional. And they teach that from it basically in travel hockey at the youngest age. It's all the way through. And there's some coaches require an actual suit, still to this day.
When I was a high school soccer player, we some of us who were playing at a higher level, I guess, and had potential to go on and play at a higher level, were recruited for camp. And that camp, we went to that camp and we trained. You have to train. You get up 3:00 in the morning. You'd be doing all this training and stuff. It was a soccer camp designed to get you ready for college or pros or whatnot. But they would have these guest speakers that were from all over, from the NBA. But these guys would come in and they would talk to us, and they were like, you really need to practice behaving this way, because now you're starting to professionalize what you're doing. So the expectations changed, and that camp was an eye opener. Really, we got to wear a suit and tie? Heck, I mean, I barely get my shoes on, right? So, it was really helpful. It really took us young athletes and made us understand how important it was to professionalize things. I think our sport, suffers a lot because we have, so many people in jerseys now. You don't even know who's who. When you get
that's another topic for a whole another couple hours there, buddy.
Yeah. This is what I can say. This is the advice I can give in closing. If you're wanting to get into sport and you're wanting a company to support you, the biggest thing that you can do is be as humble as possible. And that is so hard. I rarely find people like that. I hate to say that, but I see a lot of egos. And again, I played a professional sport, so that the egos don't really trip me out. I know that you have to put the ball in the net or in the basket if you're really that good, no matter what you say. So the egos don't bug me so much. But what used to shock me is every once in a while I'd come across a guy that was a decent angler, and he was as humble as could be, helpful as could be, willing to learn. Those guys are a dime. I mean, they're diamond. I mean, they're just they're so rare. So
there's not as many of them in the sport as there used to be.
If I can encourage you young guys to know that. The other tip I can give you is I get calls on, hey, do you got a place on me on your team for me? And I'm like, who are you? Like, where's the resume?
Yeah.
I'm not lying.
I get asked that all the time too. Like, hey, can you sponsor me? Like, dude, I'm a YouTuber. Why am I going to sponsor you?
Yeah, and so the whole term sponsor, the whole term endorsement, the whole term partnership has been diluted dramatically. I've gotten, and I try to, every inquiry I get, I try to read up on it. And sometimes I go back, and some of these guys, you're looking into their Facebook and you're seeing what these guys are doing. They're flipping off their buddies and spitting on their mamas, and and they're like, yeah, dude, I just want to be a bass pro, or whatever. And you're like, whoa. But I would say the second thing that you could do is understate and over deliver. I used to do that. in the industry. I would promise an organization, an entity, an individual something, and I would try my best to make it twofold or threefold, whatever I said I could do. Because I figured if I could make the bigger impact for them, then they knew out the gate I was serious.
And they
then
also will remember you.
Yes, and then I do it 2 or 3 more times. It didn't matter to me. I've been there on some levels. Even though I've worked in the industry, people don't realize that I worked in the industries. I may have worked for a company. I'll go to another company, and maybe I'm fishing tournaments that season, and I say, "Gosh, I I fish your jigs all the time. I would love to work with you. I think I could help and promote your company," and have the jig company look at you and go, "Goodbye," and go, "Okay." That's part of it. But now, social media and access to individuals is like, I get a lot of backdoor messages. "Hey man, it's good to you. Hey, I just wanted to say hello to you. How you doing?" And then you're talking to the guy and you're having a great conversation about fishing. And then the guy goes, "Yeah, so do you have any spots on your pro team?" And you're like, "Oh, I thought we were talking fishing."
Wouldn't it be better if the guy goes, "Hey, how can I help Duo get bigger," and not ask for anything? How would that go with you? Would you go, "You know what? I'm going to throw this guy some free lures because he did X amount of posts, or he's doing stuff without, just trying to promote me." And that kind of goes back to some of the things that like Gary V talks about. I don't know if you ever watch him, but like he goes, if you want to be in industry, go say, "I'll intern for free," and see what the hell happens. You're going to get a lot of no's, but you're going to get that one guy's going to do it, and you're going to prove yourself to be really valuable, and they're going to say, "You know what? Now I'm going to pay you because I want you to want for myself.
Yeah,
I don't want anyone else to get you."
That's part of that whole over deliver, right? Understate and over deliver. How you do that, how creative you are in that, I think is your prerogative. But I think what happens a lot of times is guys don't have the long game in play. And the other thing is as company, if I play the other side and I'm on the company side, I hear 1,000 promises and only one delivered. So I hear that all the time from guys. "Oh man, I do this, I'll do that," and I don't hold people as accountable to that. Some companies are like, "You will do X, Y, Z this week. The next week you'll do this. Then you're going to do social media this way," and that's for the 2 lures that you get the next month. Mm-hmm. And they nail the guy down. I understand that concept too. I don't utilize that concept. I really want the individual. If you think you can help me, you should already know about the lures that we have.
Yep. 1,
you should already know about the lure. You may see a pretty thing called Realis out there. That's not one you should ask for an endorsement, partnership, whatever you want to call it, sponsorship. That's not when you should do it. What you should do is from there say, "I think I really like this company. Now I'm going to learn all about it." I used to spend my hard-earned money and buy lures so that I could read and study everything about that lure. And if that lure came out to be a necessity or a tool for me that I was going to be able to use, it was already in my gray matter. I already had it up here. And if I decided that I was going to do something with that company on some level, sometimes a company would approach me and say, "Hey, could you help us a little bit?" And we'd write out a private contract or whatnot. When that would happen, I still felt super obligated to do the best that I could for that company. I never once said, man, Now, hopefully you're on the same path. But the way you get on the same path is about the lure. So if you like Sunline fishing line, don't go to Sunline and say, "Hey, man, how can I get on with you guys?" Go buy their line.
Yep.
Go buy their line. Do the string test, the elongation test, do all the stuff that you can do to know about that line. Then when you come back to them, you're talking, because I'll have guys come to me all the time and go, "Yeah, man, I really like your jerk bait, man." And I go, "Which one?" And they're like, "Well, that long one. The one that's long, I like that one." I'm like, "Well, there's 6 long ones." "Oh, well," and then you find out, the guy's getting kind of caught in a pickle, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because he really didn't know about that. And I can't tell you how many times that happens. And I say that with compassion to guys. I'm not trying to set people up. What I'm trying to say is, if you really want to be part of something, an entity, then become the best expert that you can about that company first.
A really good example of that is Aaron Martens with RoboWorm. His deal with them. I was watching an interview a few years ago. He still gets the same amount of money that he's gotten when he was living on the west side of the state of the country. It was like $500 a year. But he loves the product. He wants to help the company succeed, and that's all he gets from them.
Yeah, yeah. I don't I don't pick and pick my nose into or put my nose into what he's making on that. So I don't
know. That was in public space. That was like an interview. He was sitting there. The guy from RoboWorm told this whole story, and Aaron's like, "Yeah." I was like, "Wow, you're a cheap date, dude. Here comes all these new companies at you." But he explained it as like, yeah, they're a smaller company. They can't do for me what other companies can do for me. But I'm still loyal to them. But they also understand that it's also a business.
Right.
There's gonna come a time that I may not be able to do certain things for you anymore, just because
Yeah, and I know guys that have in the past. I had a company one time. I just loved their product, and so I said, listen, they wanted me to do more. I didn't even have the time to do more for them, but I just loved their product. They were just a smart company. And I just said, I'm going to pay for the product. I don't want you to give it to me. I want to pay. One, it shows you how much I approve of this product. Two, you need to make a living too at this. And so I'd rather just pay for it. It would be okay. The outcome of that is I actually learned about the lures, I think, a little bit better as well, because I wasn't, getting them for free or discounted or whatnot.
Well, because you paid for them, you're like, I better learn how to use these.
Yeah, yeah.
Versus when you just get sent to you for free, which I love getting free care packages in the mail from you. But that's a whole nother story. You're trying to teach me how to use your lures. You spend the time with me, and then I got to find the time to actually put what you taught me verbally into practice on the water. And sometimes it clicks, like with spybait. Other times it's just not coming together. I know I'll get there. I'll get there. And then once I get there, I'm like your number one ambassador. Probably not, but I'm like, dude, you gotta try this one. Like that new Apex lipless. I haven't given it enough because our weather's been so screwy. Sure. I want to get bit on what I know I can get bit on. So I haven't had that gap of, okay, fishing's easy. Let's go learn something a little bit newer. Or our water temp's in the right place. I can throw something, no matter what, I'm going to get bit. I can get some confidence into it. I can learn how it moves. I threw it probably 2 or 3 times, but not long enough. I'll be honest, not long enough. But I like it so far. It hasn't. Just like spybait, I thought the thing looked so freaking cool, but I had no idea how to use it yet. So
I shoot it through the gun. That's what I do. Yeah.
So one day I'll get there. But I mean, just if you get a passion for a brand, this day and age, show the brand you have the passion for them.
Yeah.
And then if you get the opportunity to talk to them down the road, or you run into them at ICAST, or you run into them at the Classic, you never know, that lucky conversation might happen. Like, you know what? I recognize you. Like, oh, I tag you all the time on Instagram or whatever. And then the relationship builds from just more of a casual conversation, and then stuff happens.
Right.
A lot of youth don't understand that part,
Great.
unfortunately.
Well, we gave them 3 things to tackle. Yep. We gave them 3 things to tackle, right? Get to know that product or that company. Get to know them. I mean, it takes you 5 minutes to get on their website. You get on their YouTube, you see all the different videos maybe that they do in regards to that product. Get to know the product. Go out and buy the product. Now you've got a good idea about it. Maybe you really, really like it, right? I mean, and maybe that's really true. You get to know it, but get out there and learn about that product as deep, as intimate as you can. And then when you come to the door, you tell the company what you can do for them. I'm not opposed to a guy saying, "Hey, man, what could I do?" But I'm thinking at this level, if this was a job, you would walk up to the employer, you would hand them your resume, your cover letter, for example, or send it email, And you would maybe get to an interview and you would have to tell your employer your skill set, or take an aptitude test or do something. But that's what would happen. You would have to explain your skill set somehow, or your skill set be defined. And so, if you really are wanting to be in the industry at some level, then tell them what you can do for them. And it may not be climbing Mount Everest. It may be, hey, listen, I can go visit stores for you. That's what I'll do. I got 600 people on my Facebook. I will post to them every single day. I'm not telling you what to say. I'm just saying you create a plan that very rarely does anglers say, let me show you what I can do for you. Very rarely do I see that. I used to use that premise from the angling side. I used to tell them, let me show you what I could do. I'd study the company and see where they were at in their growth. I would see where they're at with their ad worth. I would see where they're at on other things. And then I would say, here's maybe their weak point. They don't have anybody here. Let me see if I can support that. Sometimes you had to pull a rabbit out of the hat, honestly. But I got to know those companies before I made that decision.
So we're gonna have to cut it off right here. I got less than a minute before it cuts off. So thank you for hopping on here, man. I wanted to show everybody what a small snippet of our phone calls are, and what the few of us have been lucky to have these with you. Because I could honestly sit here for another 3 hours and talk. So we just can't do that with this program, unfortunately.
You tell your fans thank you for putting up with me and letting me borrow you, because it's a great experience. I support what you're doing. I think it's good. I think you're bringing kind of a real perspective to this game we call bass fishing. You're definitely showing how you're involved in it, what intrigues you, and I think that's important. People are openly able to share on your platform. I think it's a good thing. I think it's a really good thing for your fan base, for sure.
So with that, we're going to sign off before I run out of time. So thank you guys for tuning in. Be sure to subscribe, like, follow, give me a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts, because I am now officially on there as of today. As always, guys, tight lines, happy casting. We'll see you in the next video.